the hour of somewhere over the rainbow, where high there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Well, somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you did dream, I ain't gonna say ya, they really do come true. Someday I wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are behind me, where trouble smells like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you find me. Well, somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you did dream, they really do come true. Someday I wish upon a star, and I wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble smells like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you find me. Well, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, if birds fly over the rainbow, why then oh why can't I? If birds fly then oh why can't Okay, I haven't done one on the Pope and the Vatican for a while. I'm pretty sure this one's new. I'm not sure how new. There's two of them, but I'll do this one first, I think. Oh, that looks good. I might start with that.
The #1 recommended brand for dry and sensitive skin. Feel assured. Feel QV. Don't you just love?
No, I won't. I've got two Vatican ones, so I'll play one Vatican and then the second one after I play that one. So I'll break them up.
I want to know why I'm here. Can any of us know that? Become yourself. Let God and the devil send messages. God will learn. Understand. Be careful. Can you find the force to enable these two opposite lines to lift the truth in yourself? At any moment, the woman can devour the man. And you must learn what it means to become responsible. This is an exact passion. And that's why you are here.
I have a full history. It's a man of the future. This is Release Radio.
So I hope you check it out. Tom Horn is an internationally recognized lecturer, radio host, and best-selling author of several books, including Petrus Romanus, The Final Pope is Here, and the upcoming Exo Vaticana. He is a well-known columnist who has been interviewed by U.S. congressmen and senators on his findings, as well as featured repeatedly in the major media. Tom received the highest degree, honorary doctorate, bestowed in 2007 from legendary Professor Dr. I.D.E. Thomas for his research into ancient history. And today we're going to discuss the recent news of the abdication of Pope Benedict XVI and the prophecy of the final Pope, Peter the Roman, whose reign would end in the destruction of Rome. The list of the popes from St. Malachi heralds the beginning of great apostasy, followed by great tribulation, setting the stage for the imminent unfolding of apocalyptic events. According to this prophecy, the next pope will be a false prophet who leads the world's religious communities into embracing a political leader known as Antichrist. We will also discuss the reformation of the Catholic Church and how whoever seats the throne of the papacy might take a more active part in both politics and the disclosure of extraterrestrial life, something Tom writes more about in the upcoming book, Exo Vaticana. All right, welcome back so soon, we should say, due to these very interesting developments, of course. Thank you for taking the time talking with us today, Tom.
Hey, Henrik, always great to be with you on Red Eyes Radio.
Excellent. I know how many requests you've gotten about this, understandably, so we're very fortunate to have you with us. We really appreciate it. So tell us, first of all, Tom, what has happened and what you know so far regarding the resignation of the Pope, Tom?
Well, of course, I think we knew, at least we speculated a lot. Last year, 2005, when we released that book, Petrus Romanus, The Final Pope is Here, because and by the way, I should say that I don't consider myself to be a prophet. A lot of people now are saying that I am. I really don't see that at all. All I think I am is an investigator, and maybe I'm pretty good at analytical deductions, because we saw evidence in 2012 that the Pope was about to resign, and that, of course, he is the next to the final one on the ancient prophecy of the popes, which is ascribed to St. Malachi, which we can talk about if you like to. And I came on your show last year, and we talked about that and how it was our feeling that the Pope was going to resign in 2012. And in fact, I might have said this on your show. We certainly said it in the book that we speculated he was going to resign in March or April of 2012.
Yeah.
Now, we were led to believe that that didn't happen. And here just on Monday, this last week, so we're only talking, what, 5 days ago or something, 6 days ago, 7 days ago, whatever it is. I'm sorry, I've been doing so much radio, I don't know what day it is anymore.
No worries, though.
But basically a week ago, the Pope announced that he was going to abdicate his bishopry over Rome and his sitting upon the throne of Peter. And now, why that brought a great deal of attention back upon me was 3 weeks before the Pope announced that he was going to resign, I was on another radio show with Steve Quayle, in which I said that the resignation of Pope Benedict was imminent. Well, then 3 weeks later, he resigned, and everybody in the world wanted to know how I knew that, right? An interesting thing, though, that we have since learned is that, in fact, the Pope actually stepped down in 2012, exactly when we speculated that he was going to. And this was verified in a February 11 article in the New York Times. The title of that article, if somebody wants to look it up, is called "A Statement Rocks Rome, Then Sends Shockwaves Around the World." This was right on the heels of the Pope turning in his resignation. And if you read that article, you see where the editor of the Vatican-owned newspaper, the El Observatore Romano, a man by the name of Giovanni Maria Vian, he confirmed that the Pope had actually handed in his resignation at the exact time that we predicted he would, March 2012. And the New York Times quotes the Vatican spokesman saying, quote, "The Pope's decision was taken months ago after his trip to Mexico and Cuba in March 2012,
Yes.
and it has been kept with a reserve that no one could violate." Well, boy, they really kept a lid on that, because even most of the cardinals were unaware that he had officially turned in his resignation. And maybe the bigger or deeper mystery is why he turned it in last year. And by the way, when somebody says, well, how did you deduce down to March or April of last year? That actually had a lot to do with the French Codex by René Thibault that I talked with you about a year ago. People could listen to that archive show in which we went through some of the speculation about René Thibault, and he's the one that actually had brought it right down to March and April. So based on a lot of other deductions, and then using the Jesuit codebreaker for Rome, who over 60 years ago said that that he didn't name Benedict, but he said that the Pope before Petrus Romanus would resign around March or April of 2012.
Wow, they said that 60 years ago. Wow.
So he absolutely nailed it on the head. This raises just a huge amount of questions about the prophecy of the popes, whether the prophecy of the popes was supernaturally inspired, either, divinely or demonically. I'll let other people determine what they think about that, right?
Yeah.
But it was supernaturally inspired. Or maybe the deeper question is, there are those inside the Vatican who hold this prophecy to some esteem, and the College of Cardinals have been using it like a roadmap to vote for, to elect popes who somehow can be seen as fulfilling that prophecy. And maybe there was some Was there some pressure? Was there some opus dei manipulating going on behind the scenes in Rome that put pressure on Benedict to step down at that exact moment, because that's the way the prophecy had speculated it? It just raises a huge number, probably more questions than answers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very interesting, very strange as well. Now I have to ask you, Tom, does all of this then have something to do with the trip to Mexico in March 2012? There came out some articles that he fell, he hit his head in some way, and this is like what has led to all of this. Do you agree with that? Have you read that?
Well, he was injured. Now, did he fall? Was he attacked? Just who in the world knows? But he was injured, according to the official stories. He woke up the next day, had blood on his head. By the way, today's news reporting that he's gone blind in one eye.
Really?
Yeah. And furthermore, we've known for some time that, and this played into our speculations about why and when he would retire, that his health wasn't doing that well. He was getting weaker and weaker. He's being wheeled around on a cart at some of the places where he went to speak. He himself, don't forget, in an interview had been asked whether it would ever be permissible for a pope to step down, or should they always die in office. And he had actually argued, and he used to be known as God's Rottweiler. He was a strong theologian for the church, great at arguing. And he had actually said that if the Pope, got to a point where he could no longer carry out his duties as the Pope, then it would be permissible under church rules and law for that Pope to be able to step down so somebody else could do the job that could actually carry out the functions of the church. So he himself had argued that. That played into some of our deductions. And then his brother, who is a priest as well, last year, had been talking about how his health was failing, and that he felt he was putting pressure as a family member, a brother, on Benedict to consider stepping down. So a lot of this doesn't really come as a surprise. The fact that he was weak, that he's aged, he's 85, that he slipped and fell and maybe fractured his skull or something. It's all completely believable, but it still doesn't address how, over 60 years ago, Rene Thibault, how could he have known that you would have a pope who was going to get old and fall down and have to retire? The other thing, by the way, that's brought a lot of attention on us is that we say in our book, Petrus Romanus, that this pope would not die in office, but in fact he would retire. Now, that was a bold statement, since this hasn't happened for 600 years. I mean, to put this in perspective, the U.S., Europeans had not even come here and discovered this as a country. This was a very long time ago since the last pope actually retired in office, but we predicted that he would. And 3 weeks before the pope stepped down, that's what I repeated, that he wouldn't die in office, that he was going to step down. And I had a very strong feeling about that. Now, of course, it brings us to the final part of that prophecy. And who is it that is going to be elected into the role of Petrus Romanus? And I don't know how long, when this show is going to play on air, but we're within, 2 to 3 weeks right now, probably, of that decision being made, unless for some reason it gets drawn out.
Yeah, this is going to go up in just a few days here. So basically, what we've heard so far is that is officially going to resign on the 28th of February. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so he's given a little bit of headway here and leeway, if you will. Do you know now if the procedure is going to be standard as usual when a pope, previously then has died? The whole all the cardinals are going to get together and select, and with the smoke and all the stuff that we know about. Is that what's going to happen next?
Yeah, that is what's going to happen next. And to understand the rules around this, right now, on the next day after his retirement is official. So if he goes through February 28th, and this is not a leap year, March 1, Peter the Roman Bertone, who is his Carmelingo and the current Secretary of State, will then step into the official capacity of being the Pope in place of the Pope until a Pope can be elected. So if for no other reason, then for at least a very short period of time, the prophecy is going to have a very uncanny sense about it, that you have an Italian, he's a Roman, he was born in Romana Canaverse, his name is Peter, so you have this a startling fulfillment of the prophecy, at least for a very short period of time, in Cardinal Peter Bertone, excuse me, got too many names going through my head. All of the elector cardinals, and there's not supposed to be more than 120. I don't know how flexible they are on those rules, but let's say 120 electors, the College of Cardinals, they will head now to the Vatican, and there'll be a whole process of sequestering the voting members so that the outside world can't have contact with them. Any cardinal who's turned 80 before the day that the papacy was vacated, either by death or resignation, cannot take part in the election. And that would mean that if Bertone was elected, he's, I think, 78 now, that would just squeak in. I think there's reasons, by the way, I could give you who I think my top potential electees are. I think there's reasons why Bertone at one time would have been a favorite and probably isn't now. I think Peter Turkson of Ghana had a lot going for him. He's made some mistakes in the last week because he's said to the media, he has said publicly that he would be willing to take the position of the Pope if the Lord willed it. Well, that's a giant no-no. The electors really frown on you being out there where it appears maybe that you're candidating like an American president. They don't like that at all. So he may have shot himself in the head with those comments. Anyway, there has to be a 2/3 vote plus 1 majority. That's what's required to elect a pope. 2 ballots each are held in the morning and afternoon. If a new pope's not elected after 12 to 13 days, then they can choose to impose just a majority rule, so a simple majority. And I can explain the whole process, how they write down the votes. People wonder what's up with the white smoke and the black smoke. That's because when they write down their votes, they fold the paper a certain way. They put that paper onto a certain plate that's then spilled over into another plate on the top of an altar. Those are counted by what they call the scrutineers. If, though, nobody gets the 2/3 plus 1 majority at the first part of the vote, they keep doing it. But in any case, if nobody's elected, there's a chemical that they put on those ballots, and they put them in the furnace. And when they're burned, then that smoke comes out, and it's black. And then they know that, so far nobody's been elected. When the smoke finally turns white, then they'll know that somebody has been elected. So there's a whole process around how they do this. It's very archaic, but it's the way they still do it. And they're headed there now. Now, the rules normally would say that when a pope passes away, within 2 weeks, the College of Cardinals is supposed to come together to begin this whole process. That's the reason why everybody at first was saying they're going to come to Rome March 15th, because with the Pope resigning on the 28th, 2 weeks, basically those are the rules. But they can choose to come together sooner than that. And with the Pope resigning, they have they have an early notice. And that's why some media right now is saying they might come together even sooner than that and start the process earlier on in March. But right now we expect that from the middle to the end of March, certainly before Easter, they're hopeful that we will have a new pope, and the world will then know who Petrus Romanus, of this 900-plus-year-old medieval prophecy, who that personality is, and then, of course, wait with bated breath to see if the rest of the prophecies around him, the speculation around him, plays out.
I want to get into more of the prophecy here, of course, and if you have any new top electees, as you said. I remember we talked about Peter Turkson the last time, and Bertoni and all these as well. But before we go there, a few hours, I think, just after the Pope's resignation was announced, we had lightning striking the Vatican. I mean, come on, I'm not saying that this is not an act of God, but are they playing with harp here? This is like theatrics, Tom.
Well, one of the things people are going to learn, I think in the second hour, we're talking about our new investigation, which we were already working on, called Exo Vaticana. We've been working on it ever since we stopped Petrus Romanus last year, and now we're feverishly trying to get that investigation finished. We're hoping to have actual book in print by the time the conclave is in session, and we'll see. I think the second book, it's actually bigger, it has more footnotes in it, and in many ways is actually more shocking than the first one. But as it hits the typesetter, we don't know whether the last pope's going to turn out to be a person on our short list, but whoever he is, there's some intrigue surrounding how he might accommodate the newly celebrated astrotheology of Rome's top astronomers and theologians that we investigate in the second book. But part of this has to do with signs from the heavens. We devote entire sections in this book to pointing out how the Bible describes the false prophet. Some people believe that Petrus Romanus, some people believe that the very next prophet, pope, is going to be the false prophet of biblical fame. And I'm not just talking about evangelicals. There are Catholics who believe this, and there are Catholics.
And he's lived up to that, guys, changing the Lord's Prayer. He's done a lot of wicked things, meeting all the world's religions and saying there's many paths to God. He's a false prophet, all right.
Academics who have written about it for a long time. So we go into all that. But here's the point. The false prophet and the Antichrist in the Bible have allegiances and endowments that are not of this earth, including the fact that both of them can call fire down from out of the heavens, which of course is suspected to be the host location of those aliens. What the first thing that went through my mind when lightning struck February 11th, now we're just talking, what is, again, 1 week ago. This is very recent.
Yeah.
Struck St. Peter's Basilica twice, immediately following the resignation of Pope Benedict. This whole thing, the very first verse that went through my mind had to do with how they have power to call fire down from out of heaven. Now, it was also 2 lightning bolts, which numerically corresponds very well with the false prophet and the Antichrist.
How so?
Well, 2, they both have the power to call fire down from out of heaven. So you have 2 lightning bolts, one after the other. And there's, by the way, there is an ancient occultic, but also a biblical perspective around this. For instance, the scripture says, and the Lord speaks once, yea, twice. And in occultism and in biblical scholarship, there is a precedent that says, if the Lord wants to confirm something, he'll repeat it. And so lightning striking twice, and not just lightning striking somewhere in Rome, hitting St. Peter's
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Which, and then right there, in the near distance is the Roman obelisk that speaks to the coming of this final figure that we believe to be the Antichrist. There's just a great deal around this. And again, this isn't just Tom Horn. They're Catholics right now. One of the most highly visited Catholic websites is run by Michael Brown. I don't know if you've ever interviewed him. He runs Spirit Daily.
Yeah, no, not yet.
Yeah. Well, he and we've communicated over the past, but just something like 2-3 days ago, he had a headline that he wrote on Spirit Daily called "When Lightning Strikes, Sometimes It Is Simple Energy in the Air, and Sometimes Perhaps Something Else." That's the title. And he goes on to point to Catholics and to remind them how many apparitions of their faith and also omens, both auspices and inauspices, have been warnings to the faithful that have been accompanied by lightning. And he talks about the apparitions at Lourdes, which, by the way, were also commemorated last Monday, the day the Pope made his announcement. But he points to that and reminds Catholics how apparitions were combined with thunder and lightning at Lourdes. Then he points how it was a flash of lightning that introduced the first appearance of the apparitions at Fatima in 1917. And that's also something you and I talked about last year on your show, how that the true revelation of Fatima might have been being covered up, but might actually now come to pass with the election of the final Pope. The Spirit Daily also points to Medjugorje, the night before Mary's first reported apparition. Lightning struck with such force that it actually damaged the village post office and some other buildings, and villagers went running out into the streets to sprinkle holy water on the ground. It scared them so much. Thunder and lightning on the mountains of La Salette in France that herald the appearance of Mary. So this list goes on and on and on. There is a significant number of comparable facts that when something of significance was happening within the Roman Catholic Church, whether it was church-approved apparitions or now the retirement of Pope Benedict, all of a sudden you get this lightning, right, coming from out of the heavens. It's very strange. Now, is it hard? There is this this other thought kind of rambling in the back of my mind. I don't know if you remember, there was a woman by the name of Dr. Carol Rosen.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And she swore that before he died, Dr. Werner von Braun, in the 70s, she was working in an office with him, and he shared with her how that there was going to be a fake alien invasion of planet Earth, and that this was all what was really behind the whole Star Wars project and all that, that would be used to set up a one world government, right?
Yeah.
Well, if that's true, that there's going to be some kind of a fake invasion that then would bring the world to its knees in fear, that would then give rise to a one world government because everybody's crying out for some kind of safe haven, then if that's true, if that technology is developed to that stage, well, then of course it could have been heart or something else that sent a lightning bolt down. But I take a more supernatural, metaphysical approach to it in my own belief system. And I think, like Michael at Spirit Daily, I think something is astir in the supernatural realm. And let me just give you a quote, by the way, from his website that I have right here. He's talking on and on and on about all this. He says, a pope's resigning for the first time in 6 centuries, a pope who took the name Benedict, as in the saint who battled evil. In a letter on the same day, February 11, 2013, naming a special envoy to a solemn celebration of the World Day of the Sick, Benedict included the term Mary, mediatrix of all graces. Now listen to what he says about this. This is a title that was used very sparingly by pontiffs. It's only attached in the minds of many Catholic faithful with the potential declaration of a new dogma, one that they feel could herald major events in the world, a dogma that up until now Benedict has long resisted. It comes when astronomers expect to see a highly visible comet, which may even appear during the conclave, announcing a new pope. Some believe the next pope will be the last in this particular era. Time will tell, end quote. So here's a very popular Catholic website, and his writer is saying that this could be the last pope, the fulfillment of Petrus Romanus, and that this comet is a sign, and further, that a papal decree.
Guys, I'm pretty sure on this, when Francis was elected, there was a meteor going across, and they named it the Beast. I'm pretty sure that's correct. So he was right. There was a meteor going on, because Francis hasn't been elected yet. Benedict's just stood down.
Heralding a major change in dogma. Well, I can tell you, though I can't yet let the cat out of the bag, our book, Exo Vaticana, is about that very subject, a coming papal decree that is going to, well, let me just put it this way. It's not only going to say that belief in extraterrestrials is okay for Catholics. What it's really going to say is that denying the reality of extraterrestrials is akin to heresy, because it limits God's creative ability. And what the Jesuits and members of Opus Dei have written in the form of official church theology, brand new doctrinal papers that have been written, which we're publishing, I think is absolutely, Henrik, it's going to shock the world, because they evidently know something that the rest of us don't know that seems to be pointing to a very imminent official disclosure moment that somehow, some way is going to need for the Vatican, the largest Christian organization in the world, to tell everybody that it's okay, and these are our space brothers. And not only are they our space brothers, they're closer to God than we are, and they've come to show us the way.
Very interesting. I can't help to wonder as well how much of a political move all of this is. I mean, if we for a moment put the supernatural aspects to the side, which when we zoom out and look at the whole picture, we have to take everything into account, of course. But
sure.
This is at a time now when there's been tremendous scandals around the Vatican and all this stuff with the pedophilia and the protection of these priests and everything. And I couldn't help to feel at the beginning, at least, that someone might be forcing, Benedict off the stage, if you will, because they want to bring someone else onto the scene that can, do a better cleanup job, if you will, Tom, in all of this.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. Again, that was all part of what we wrote in Petrus Romanus. In fact, we've had people this week and last week, since the Pope resigned, telling us that really the most tantalizing aspects of our investigation didn't have anything to do with the supernatural side of it. It was the side where we were dealing with the Vaticans and trying to interpret in a very just geopolitical atmosphere what that scandal, what was really going on behind the scenes. And we were trying to get some Vatican insiders, priests, trying to get them to talk to us. And we were having a very hard time. And mostly, I think, Henrik, because most of them didn't really know. You had to get way up the ladder. It was really among a small tribe of the real power brokers inside the Vatican. But the more we investigated it, at one time I did also hire a private investigator, and the more we investigated it, if you go back and look at articles that we published a year ago now, we were publishing these in March, April, and May on Raiders News Update. And you'll see how we were already talking about somebody leaking papal documents. That turned out to be Paola Gabriel, right?
Yeah.
He got arrested by the magistrates as the source behind the leaked documents. The minute that happened, we said he's just a figurehead. He's somebody who was being used, but he was being used by people much more powerful than he is. Then a Vatican computer expert was arrested, Claudio Ciarletti, and he was convicted of aiding and abetting, and we said he's just another pawn. And then one cardinal was suspected of operating behind the scenes. And anyway, what we've been saying from the beginning is that this was a much deeper internal power struggle. Well, now, church historian Alberto Maloney, he's writing how that all of it was just a power struggle among cardinals in the Curia, the Vatican Central Administration, a stratagem of tension, an orgy of vendettas. That's the kind of language they're using, preemptive vendettas. And then there was an article talking about how Bertoni was plotting, what was the language they used? Something like extraordinary counter moves. So it was move, counter move. But really it comes down to 2 or 3 very powerful people in the Vatican who were jockeying to take the place of Benedict. Whether they would look at that as, I want to play the role of Petrus Romanus, whether that part of it is true or not, didn't make any difference. They knew that Benedict's time, that his days were numbered, right? And they were jockeying for position, which included mudslinging against their main competitors. So you had people probably on the one side, Sedano, people like that, who were also part of the Fatima cover-up, who were using their political influence to try to, play off of some of these leaked documents to make Bertoni look bad. Bertoni, on the other hand, he's an Italian, probably has a lot of friends inside the Vatican that were trying to protect his position as possibly, the candidate that would take Benedict's place. But right now, some Vatican insiders are becoming more blunt. There have been news reports just in the last couple of days talking about since Benedict has stepped down, and now some of these people are becoming a little braver about this mutiny of the Monsignors that's been playing out behind the scenes, jockeying for the role of the final pope. And the bottom line is the unpleasant reality is that a conflict has been going on for probably 24 months, at least for 18 months, over who will become Petrus Romanus. And it's been boiling beneath the surface, almost completely unknown to the public at large, but foresaw, I think, by some of the Catholic prophets, and not just Malachi or Morguer, more recent Catholic prophets like Father Herman Bernard Kramer, who wrote about all this in the Book of Destiny and talked about the final pope who would come and how it would be a time that would be accompanied by a lot of great negativity around Rome. And by the way, even some of the some of the most oldest Catholic prophets, Father Cardinal Manning, different ones, foresaw that Rome would eventually become so apostate that it would literally be destroyed. So are we seeing that? Is that what we're seeing? That beneath the surface we're seeing the beginning of the end? Or is it all just politics around the pedophilia scandal? The Pope now, here's another thing we learned was that when he resigned last year in March, April, secretly to just a handful of individuals, they started right at that moment taking, I think, what was an old nun convent or something, but a building, or was used by the nuns, but it's on the grounds of the Vatican, and they started remodeling that into an apartment, a building where Pope Benedict is going to retire. They started doing that March, April of last year. And were they at that time saying, in order to try to keep him from being prosecuted in an international court, which could then, as the Pope, represent Vatican, the Vatican at large, the Roman Catholic Church at large, which has just amazing levels of financial resources, to stop that, he could retire. We'll force him to retire. And we're going to give him a little place to live on the Vatican grounds, which we could say we're our own nation state, and nobody can come here and arrest him.
Right.
So, yeah. Is that what you was talking about?
Yeah, well, definitely. That's very interesting. And you mentioned financial resources, because I want to try to get a little closer to this on a geopolitical level, we're all wondering how much influence does the Vatican really have? How much does the Pope individually even have? Because if we look at least the language of the Vatican, as you said before, they are definitely kind of spearheading in some cases, the strive towards a new world order, a global government in some cases. And so how important is it, do you think, for some of these people behind the scenes to become Pope? Would that even be significant? Would that be, can they influence a lot being that?
Yeah, I mean, look, they don't politic like American presidents do, or governors or whoever, who go out and step up on a stump and try to convince a bunch of voters of a particular thing. But they do politic. They sit in their lunch rooms and have, wine and cigarettes and sit there and yak about who they think, the next pope should be. And sadly, it probably doesn't have a whole lot to do with the spiritual health of the church. It usually has more to do with who could politically favor the ideas of those particular cardinals. That's really what it comes down to. Who could we put into office who could be a champion for our causes? And so that's another reason right now, when you think about what's being said about Peter Turkson of Ghana, oh yeah, his name would be an amazing fulfillment, since he is named Peter, and once he started ruling from Rome, he'd be Peter the Roman, Peter from Rome. But how much political influence does Ghana have? I don't know, because I don't think there's a whole lot of Africans cardinals among the electors, but there is a majority Italian electors. And Rome is still an old boys club among the Italians.
Well, 112 miles long, so it's a huge lake.
Oh, yeah, it just is.
Sure.
They went out on a limb, recently. They elected a German. They've elected, other people. But I think this time around it's going to come back to Rome. My prediction.
Well, it only holds 26% capacity of water. Wow, that's really bad.
Would be that it's probably going to be an Italian. Now, Cardinal Tarcisio Bertoni, he's the man most responsible for appointing a large block of Italian elector cardinals last year that Benedict endorsed. But he's also angered and embarrassed a lot of non-Italian cardinals, so I think it's going to be hard to get him elected. A little side note, by the way, Cardinal Bertoni is a Salesian, which means a disciple of Don Bosco, the saint of the 1800s, who's famous for his vision about a future pope who arrives just as the Catholic Church goes through a fierce socio-political and spiritual storm that some have interpreted as the beginning of the Great Tribulation. Just an interesting side note there about Bertoni, besides his name. Of course, Cardinal Peter Turkson. I think Cardinal Angelo Scola, he's also an Italian. He's got a strong Italian bloc of voters. And he works easily with them. I'm not sure to any extent that he's been involved in the conspiratorial aspects of mudslinging. He's got a theological background that issues from the church in Rome, so that they think should be addressed. I think he's a possibility to keep in mind. There's another possibility that has the name of Peter, Cardinal Peter Erdo. And nobody's talking about him. He's a Hungarian cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church. He is the Archbishop in Budapest. He's the primate of Hungary. He's the president of the Council of the Bishops' Conferences of Europe. And he's only 61 years old. And if the cardinals this time around are looking for somebody who can stay in office for a while, he could be a surprise, Peter the Roman. Another possibility is Cardinal Bakara Batros al-Rahi. He's 72 years of age, so he's young too, but Batros means Peter in Arabic. So there's some other possibilities there that could be a surprising win that people right now are not talking about. But we're just going to have to wait and see. We did publish a top 10 list. I think the Canadian Coulee, I think he's a possibility. So anyway, I think I lost what the question was.
Oh, sure. No worries, Tom. Very interesting. What is this? Let's get a little deeper into what you think that this means then, potentially. I mean, let's say anybody comes onto the scene here which has the name Peter, let's say, becomes Peter Romanus, the last pope. in your view, what do you think that we're in for? What does this have in stock for us if one, even the prophecy is true, or the last pope? And does that mean like an era of the Antichrist ruling this planet, or what do we have to look forward to here?
Well, what both evangelicals and what some Catholic prophets have said for a long time is that when the final pope on the list of the prophecy of the popes, and don't forget that the prophecy of the popes itself says that this pope will serve the church during Great Tribulation, and then the city of Seven Hills will be destroyed.
Yeah.
So it's talking about destruction. Well, this is a biblical theme that the city on Seven Hills is the harlot, false religious enterprise, that Babylon mystery religion that will be destroyed. The Zohar, I don't know if I ever talked with you about that.
Oh, we have, I remember it, but relay it again for those who don't know.
Well, and what's also interesting about the Zohar is that it was written 700 years ago. It was written a couple of hundred years after the prophecy of the popes. There's no historical connection anywhere whatsoever that any of the writers of the Zohar were even familiar with the prophecy of the popes, because don't forget, the prophecy of the popes was hidden inside the Vatican for about 400 years. So it wasn't even public knowledge. We have no evidence whatsoever to suggest that the Jewish writers of the Kabbalah would have been familiar with it. Now that makes this extraordinary because they also named the time frame 2012 to 2013. They named it. They wrote it down. But this is when this was all going to happen, and that Rome would be destroyed. And their language is almost identical to what is contained in the prophecy of the Pope. So now, for people listening that don't know what I mean, there is contemporaneous to the arrival of the false prophet, if that's who Petrus Romanus is. And I'm not saying that the next pope will be the Antichrist or the false prophet.
Sure.
I'm saying that a lot of people believe that he will be, and they make that connection. And I'm saying he possibly could be, but I'm not saying he is. Got it? So in any case, but contemporaneous to the arrival of the false prophets and the Antichrist, there's this prophecy that's in the Jewish Kabbalah, the Zohar. That's the most important collection of Jewish mysticism. Was written in medieval Aramaic 700 years ago. But in that book, it has commentary on the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. But in addition to that, it has a section called the Ve'era section, and this includes a subsection called the Signs Heralding Mashiach, or the Coming of the Messiah. And what's fascinating about this is that they set the date for his appearance in the Zohar in 5773. And in the Jewish calendar, which is different than our Gregorian calendar, right? We say 2012, we mean January to December 2012. Their time frame is different. The Jewish calendar begins in the new moon of September in our calendar, 2012, but ends a year later in August of 2013. And here's what they said, 5773. So what is that? That's 5 months ago now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, about 5 months ago now. They set the appearance, and here's what they say. And let me preface this by also saying that to Christians, they would actually be talking about the coming of the Antichrist, because the Orthodox Jews rejected Jesus as the Messiah. So they were still predicting his coming. But evangelicals and Catholics from the Bible would say they rejected Jesus, but the Bible says that another will come in his name, that there will be an Antichrist, a false Messiah who will appear, and for a period of time, who some dispensationalists talk about a 7-year period of great tribulation. For a period of time, the world is going to accept him as the Messiah. Now, okay, so let me read you what it says. Keep in mind, as I'm reading this, the prophecy of the Zohar, given by Jews hundreds of years separate from the divination of the last pope. So you have the prophecy of the last popes talking about who potentially could be the false prophet, where the prophecy in the Zohar talking about the coming of the Antichrist. But both of them talk about the reign of that period of time ending in the destruction of Rome. here's what the prophecy of the Pope says: the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the terrible and fearsome judge will judge his people. But when you look in the Zohar, here's what it says: in the year 5773, the kings of the world will assemble in the great city of Rome. Now, let me stop here for just a second and insert this. The only time that we know that all of the representatives of the nations of the world, the kings of the earth, the only time they would send representatives to Rome from all over the world would be during a conclave.
Yeah.
I know of no other time where all of the most powerful nations on earth would be sending their ambassadors or representatives to the Vatican than during a conclave. So let me go back to the prophecy. The kings of the world will assemble in the great city of Rome, and the Holy One will shower on them fire and hail and meteoric stones until they are destroyed, with the exception of those who will not yet have arrived there, end quote. So first of all, a 700-year-old Jewish prophecy in the Zohar telling us that about the time the Messiah is going to appear, the nations of the world are going to gather in Rome, and the only ones of those representatives that aren't going to be destroyed when the city is destroyed are those who were en route to get there and hadn't yet arrived. So this sounds like it's right at the very beginning of a conclave. People are assembling, they haven't got there. Now, then it goes on to say, these will commence, not all the kings will be destroyed. These will commence anew to make war. But from that time, the Messiah will begin to declare himself, and around him there will be gathered many nations and many hosts from the uttermost parts of the earth, end quote. So they're gathering in Rome. Something happens. Meteoric stones, fiery objects, as it's translated, fall from the heavens to destroy the city. This leads to war. The nations that are surviving or they're reacting to something, this is what's caused some Catholic mystics to speculate that this is going to be a terrorist attack on the Vatican during conclave, because you got these fiery objects falling that then causes a response from powerful nations throughout the world, including probably the United States, responding to that terrorist attack upon Rome. But this is going to be the catalyst, according to this Jewish prophecy, that gives birth to the appearance of the Messiah, who we would call the Antichrist. So what's amazing is when you take this 900-year-old Catholic prophecy, this 700-year-old Jewish prophecy, and just combine it with evangelical and Christian eschatology, it's an amazing glove fit around some terrible event that then causes World War III, but which then also causes the formation of the most powerful nations of the world coming together under global government, which then could present this personality, the Antichrist, and the false prophet, the leader of the religious communities of the world, to give their devotion to the appearance.
Look at that. It's like, again, we said it before, and you have too, Tom. It's either it's a playbook or it's real, true, accurate prophecy. You know, it's very interesting. And again, just think about this. Tie in the comet here now that hit Russia 3 days ago. There's an asteroid DA14. You have Izon coming up in a few days. What if this is really is the precursor to something larger, comet-wise, asteroid-wise, actually coming in, the initial debris or something like that? It would be total mayhem, Tom, on this planet.
Yeah. Back to part of the supernatural part of this, when we were investigating the prophecy of the popes, we learned that there was also a long line of other Roman Catholics who down through time saw Rome being destroyed after becoming an engine of the Antichrist. But one thing that we turned up just recently that kind of ties a lot of this together, trying to track down, where some of the modern writers in some of the material we're working on for the new book, Exo Vaticana, where they came up with this idea that Rome would be destroyed and there's going to be the great harlot, and that somehow this is also connected to either a pretensive or actual announcement by the powers of the world that we are in contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. And what in the world does that have to do with the coming of Petrus Romanus and the Vatican and all that? Well, we're trying to put all this together. And there was a team of like 6 of us. Me and Chris Putnam are writing the book, but I have a team of like 6 of us trying to track these people down. We actually got interviews, by the way, with leading astronomers, including Guy Comfort Magno. We got 5 interviews with him from Rome. So we got this right from the horse's mouth. And when we were trying to track down where some of this theology was coming from, we came across an associate of Pope John Paul II and also Benedict, Pope Benedict XVI. This was a friend of his. And he was considered one of the most important Catholic theologians, Hans Urs von Balthasar. Now, he died in 1988. And at his funeral, Cardinal Ratzinger, then, who became Pope Benedict, of course, he praised his theology as correct and a proper roadmap for today's church. Well, what theology was he talking about? It was a provocative work by Hans von Balthasar called Casta Maritrix, or Chaste Harlot. And in this work, he not only identified the Roman Catholic Church as the great harlot of Revelation, but he embraced it. And if you read Chaste Harlot, it's astonishing. Let me just give you a fast quote.
Sure.
Wow.
Here's what it says. The figure of the prostitute is so appropriate for the church that it defines the church of the new covenant in her most splendid mystery of salvation. The fact that the synagogue left the Holy Land to go and be among the pagans was an infidelity of Jerusalem. The fact that she opened her legs in every road in the world. But this same movement, which brings her to all the people, is the mission of the church. She must unite and merge herself with every people, and this new apostolic form of union cannot be avoided, end quote. So he literally speaks in very brazen terms about how it is the responsibility of the church to spread its legs to every nation of the world. Astonishing. But so so he's one of the most outlandish. But we found that from this, the tentacles of this kind of thinking goes into a great deal of current theology. And there's no way on this show that I can get into what all this means. I should have the first typeset today, tomorrow, anytime now. And if you'll send me your email, I'll send it to you so you can read this first typeset book. It's not going to be in print for probably a month. You are going to be astonished at what some of these theologians are now saying, and the way that all this theology is married to the fulfillment of the prophecy of the popes, but also the coming of a new Catholic edict. You know, the Pope can make a papal declaration. He can announce a new dogma that then becomes something that the followers have to speak. He can speak, what do they call it, vicarious filii Dei. He can speak as the voice of God for the church, and he's infallible when he speaks in that role. And such is coming soon, and I think it's going to just absolutely astonish people what this all means. But we've documented it. We've got documents. We've got the comments from the actual theologians that are working on this for the Vatican, and we've got some of their own papers, which I don't think they're yet ready for the world to know about, but they're going to know about it.
Wow, really interesting. We're going to take a short break here, Tom. We're going to return and talk more in the second segment. Of course, we want to give out websites, RaidersNewsUpdate.com. You can catch a lot of the stuff that Tom has been talking about so far there. But of course, the book, Petrus Romanus, it's out. It's available right now. We're going to link that up. But tell us just briefly a little bit about Exo Vaticana. When do you expect to have it out again, Tom?
Well, we're rushing now. If you go to like Amazon, it and Petrus Romanus are both in the hot new releases, top releases there. And it's advertised there as being available in April the 15th, but we're trying to get it out a month ahead of time. We're trying very hard to get this done so that people will have it in hand by the time the conclave meets and announces the new pope.
All right, very interesting. We're going to link up all these sources. Of course, you can check it out and keep your eye on that. Then we're going to talk more about this when we return. We'll take a short.
Saints, the world is in turmoil, and most just don't realize it, but we are in the time of the end. And that's the time before Messiah's glorious return. So it's time to get out of sin, the world, and look to the holy city. Look to the one who suffered and died for you. Please make this choice tonight. If you need help after the program, call me, and I'll pray for you or with you. If you get the machine, please leave your name, your number, your prayer request, or message. And I would ask that you say your phone number very slowly. And if you don't get me, you can always even try emailing me. But if you call the phone and you don't get, you get an answer, you get the machine, say your phone number real slowly, say your message real slowly. But if that doesn't work also, I will give up all my privacy and give you my cell phone number for emergency. It is 316-619-4886. 316-619-4886. And folks, you can always find updates with the breaking news, our ministry, radio program archives at our mailing address at our blog, which is simply prophecyhour.com. Prophecyhour.com. You can find most everything there. And if you can't, if you're one of those folks, like my friend I ran into here a while back, he's the same age as I am. Actually, he's a couple years older than me, and we're still young. But anyway, he still to this day doesn't own a cell phone, use a computer, or any of those things. So, folks, if you're listening on radio tonight and you need a question answered or information, feel free to call me. Otherwise, you folks can go to prophecyhour.com. You can find ways to download things to your iPad, iTunes, cell phones, and all that. Okay, now a prayer, and we'll bring on tonight's guest. Dear Heavenly Father, in Yeshua HaMashiach's name I pray. Father, I pray that radio tonight goes according to your will and not my will, and not necessarily our guest's will, but again, your will. And please give everyone, including me out there, ears in which to hear the truth. So please, Father Yahweh, bless this program tonight in your Son's mighty name. Amen and amen. Well, our guest tonight was on a few weeks back. His name is Chris Putnam. Chris earned a degree in an MA in Theological Studies from the Liberty University, in addition to his BS with honors in religion and mathematics. Along with specialized university courses, he worked in the books of Daniel and Revelation. Chris has studied Hebrew eschatology and biblical prophecy at the Kahona, I guess that's how you pronounce it, Institute, as well as in his involvement with other book projects. He's written extensively in the area of Christian apologetics. Chris teaches the Bible at his local church and performs as a guitarist and maintains the www.logosapologia.org website. And we'll spell that out after a while. The last time he was on with us, he talked about his previous book with Tom Horn called Petrus Romanus. And tonight he is going to speak about his current book with Tom Horn called Exo Vaticana. I guess that's how it's pronounced. Anyway, normally, folks, I read all the books before my programs, but I just have been so tied up the last 2 weeks since this book's been out. I just haven't had time to get it together and do it. So we'll all learn together tonight. Welcome, Chris. Are you still with me? Are you there?
Hey, Pastor Dan, it's great to be back with you.
Yeah, amen. The last time was a blessing, and we're still people are still picking up that program from the archives and listening to it. And now, I mean, may call it coincidence or what? Now, 2 weeks later, and you've got another book out?
Yeah, well, the Petrus Romanus actually came out last April of 2012, so it was actually over a year old now. So they're not quite that back to back.
Well, for me, okay, come on. For me, it was. I'd noticed the book, but I did not notice that you were actually looking to do interviews until, recently. And so that's how I found you. And so to me, it was close. I haven't got a chance to get the books out from the mail and read them. I'm going to read both of them, but I'm a loss. They both sound very interesting, but I'm particularly interested in this one that you're going to talk about tonight. So I guess the first question would be, what's the very generalities of this new book?
Well, the book Exo Vaticana, it's actually the title, the prefix exo,
typically means something outside of, external. And so we really kind of borrowed that from the sort of terminology that the naturalistic scientists are now using, what they call exoplanets, even exobiology. And what they're talking about are planets that are outside of our solar system. And when they say exobiology, that's actually a division of what they call astrobiology, meaning the study of life in space. Now, technically, they don't really have anything to study, as far as I'm aware, but they think that they might, and you can actually get a degree at the university in a subject where you really don't have anything to study, but there's a lot of speculation going on. So, Exo-Vaticana, what is that all about? Well, our first book, Petrus Romanus, was really about this idea that the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, and this next pope, the pope we have right now, Pope Francis, actually does seem to fulfill this 900-year-old Catholic prophecy predicting the final pope would usher in the end times, that he would be, we theorize that he's the false prophet in biblical prophecy that kind of leads the world to accept the Antichrist and an apostate religious system. Now, right off the bat, that kind of begs the question, how the world, the world really doesn't take the Pope that seriously. So it's kind of hard to imagine why the world would fall in line, with Pope or even with the Antichrist, for that matter. It's hard to unite the world under any kind of banner these days. There's a lot of division and,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ronald Reagan might have a solution for us. And when he spoke to the United Nations General Assembly back in 1987, he said, perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize our common bond. I think occasionally how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. So, Reagan was kind of fond of making that analogy. He seemed to be implying, that he thought that could actually happen. Well, it's interesting in our research into the Vatican and the papacy and the Jesuit order, for our first book, you just can't help but come across all these articles and all this literature produced by the Catholic Church concerning extraterrestrials and exobiology and these subjects. The Vatican maintains a couple of observatories. Now, the main one that they have is in Arizona. It's on Mount Graham in Arizona in the United States. And Tom Horn and myself actually set up the deal through the University of Arizona to get a tour of that facility. So we've launched an investigation into the subject because a lot of people, were asking us, what do you think about this Vatican ET thing? Because, if you doubt that, we had a reason to look into this. I suggest just type in extraterrestrial and baptized into your search engine on the internet and see what pops up. You'll get hundreds of hits from, there are articles by various Jesuit astronomers claim that, they want to baptize extraterrestrials. Now, you can't make this kind of stuff up. The internet replete with here's the statements or articles by these astronomers. Now, these guys are from what they call the Vatican Observatory Research Group. That's the VORG. And I kind of have some fun with that name. It sounds like the VORG.
Yeah.
Right. I immediately went through them.
Diane, can you post that link to me on Skype, please? I can't hear it. I just went to play it then. Only goes for 2 minutes and I can't hear it. So I'll have to watch it later. So can you please post that to Skype? The one on the baby deaths and things like that.
Yeah, me too. And some of their behavior is remarkably similar, so it's kind of a
cool. Thanks,
analogy. But so we went to Mount Graham, and we got access to the facility, and up there they really have one of the most powerful telescopes in the world. It's called the Large Binocular Telescope, and then there's another one called the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, and then there's a radio telescope, one of those big dishes called the Submillimeter Telescope. mounted on the Large Binocular Telescope that has, it's named after an acronym that literally is called Lucifer. Now, like I said, you just can't make this kind of stuff up, but they really did name this instrument Lucifer. And, you know, I don't, you know, what that is, it's an acronym. It's a kind of a strained sort of thing. It's the infrared camera that they use to look for exoplanets, to do spectroscopy. And what that means is they look at infrared at a longer wavelength of light, and so you can see things that you really can't see in the normal spectrum. And they use it to sort of figure out what sort of chemical elements are on a planet. And they can see things that you just can't see, which makes a really interesting device. But literally, there is a device called Lucifer up on top of this telescope.
Well, that's pretty amazing. That's really pretty amazing.
Okay, cool,
I mean,
Don.
you know, to use that kind of a name for such a thing when they fully know that, or they ought to know, come on, that it's going to start people thinking conspiracy immediately.
It is awfully strange. Now, the Jesuit order will say that they didn't have anything to do with naming it. And I think they might be right about that. It seems to me that what you have on Mount Graham, that telescope, the Large Binocular Telescope is like a $33 million piece of hardware. So it's a consortium of astronomers at various universities, the University of Arizona, Notre Dame, several United States universities, but then a lot of Italian universities, and the Max Planck Institute in Germany. Now, they are the major players in the Large Binocular Telescope, and they seem to get the biggest part of the credit for naming that device Lucifer. So, you know, we immediately kind of thought maybe they were just messing with the Jesuits by naming it that.
Right.
You know, it kind of, you know, taking a stab at them or something. But no, it actually turns out that there's a German politician. Now, his name in German is literally the German word for devil, his last name. And he's actually was instrumental in getting the funding for this, the Max Planck Institute to put into this instrument. So they literally named it Lucifer in honor of him because his name is Devil, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, it's really kind of strange. It's getting stranger by the moment.
Hey, Brenda, good to see you. Yeah, Diane, we knew this was coming, didn't we?
Moment.
Yeah, no matter how they said it, they did name it after the devil. Whether it's, you know, the politician or you know, the Lucifer verse in Isaiah chapter 14 that most scholars think probably does connect to the fall of Satan in like Isaiah 14, like I think verse 11 and 12 somewhere in there. How Lucifer is, I think it's
you got it right. But that is, folks, that is really pretty funny. You know, well, we did name it after the devil, but the devil just happens to be a man in this case. But anyway, go on. No mean to interrupt.
So, what are they doing up there? Well, a large part of their mission on that ground is the search for exoplanets. Now, what an exoplanet is, like I said, it's a planet outside of our solar system. And now, as of 1996, we found the very first one. So luckily, you know, 1996, we didn't know there were any planets outside of our solar system. We never found one. And then we found the first one in 1996. Now today, due to the Kepler space satellite, they claim to have found over 600 exoplanets. Now, out of that 600, there's a short list of about 12 or so that they say are in what they call the habitable zone or the Goldilocks zone. Now, all that means is that the planet is within a certain distance from its star. It's kind of an Earth comparable distance. So really all that means is they speculate that it can hold liquid water. And of course, you know, the worldview that these sorts of scientists have, they believe, you know, basically if you have water in the right temperature, life will just evolve out of nothing. And, you know, which, of course, I think is nonsense. You know, I believe that life is a miracle. It's really only explained by God.
Yeah, and
you can hit, lightning can strike a mud puddle all day, and I don't think anything's going to come alive.
Nothing but a hot mud puddle, man. I don't know. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. The Father created the heavens and the earth and everything living that's in either.
I agree. But the thing that's weird is that these Jesuit astronomers, these Lord guys, they're supposed to believe the Bible. I mean, you would think, being Jesuits, which is supposed to be the Society of Jesus, but I mean, they absolutely have written off the creation account in Genesis as pretty much mythology. And so they really follow the same line of Darwinism and the same line of naturalistic reasoning, the same sorts of things that you hear coming out of the atheists. They're very critical of creationism. They say that creationism is not even possible. I mean, and they're very critical of intelligent design. They don't place any room for that. And so they really just follow the same Darwinism that you hear coming from the atheists. So it's really kind of astounding that we have these Catholic astronomers that are supposed to be part of this big church, but really what the kind of stuff that they say about intelligent design and creationism is the same sort of criticism I hear coming from the atheist community. And I do spend some time in the book addressing that and exposing the inconsistency in someone who's supposedly a priest, yet at the same time out of his mouth is denying creation.
Well, even in the book of it talks about in the book of Revelation that, an angel will fly through the air and say worship the Creator, and
right.
If you take away the creation, then that just takes away. Then forget about it. I mean, you can't take away the creation and still say you believe in the Bible and still believe in everything else. You just can't do it. Not in my opinion.
I agree wholeheartedly. Once you've undermined divine creation and, really the special status of man as God's creation, the image of God is what makes man, exceptional from the animals. Darwinism would have human beings just be an evolved primate. We're just a smart monkey, basically. And so once you advocate this worldview, you've really undermined Christian theology in a fundamental way, and it's very destructive. Now, so you take those sort of presuppositions that these Jesuits have, so they've signed on to the whole project of astrobiology. Now, astrobiology is basically the combination of astronomy and biology. So they're looking for life in space. Now, when you do that, I think that our whole principle is that they have opened themselves up wide to what we believe is a key component of the great deception predicted in biblical prophecy. Paul talked about a strong delusion that would lead the world to believe the lie in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Jesus said, that the deception would become so great, that if it were possible, even the elect, even the church would be deceived. And, I think about the sorts of things that we see coming out of our culture. There's people believe in supernatural things, but there's a lot more people that believe in science. If you think about some kind of lie that's going to deceive the whole world and get even, the atheists and the secularists and the occultists and get everybody under the same banner, under one system, I think it's going to be clothed in the credibility of science. It's going to have some kind of scientific appeal to it. And you look at the way our culture has been propagandized and really prepared mentally, really since the late 1940s. Probably, around the end of World War II, there's been this constant influx of flying saucer stories and mythology and UFO sightings, and then, contactees, and then the abductees. There's been this tale, it's kind of flown under the radar of the intelligentsia. The people in the universities think you're crazy if you try to talk about it, so they don't really analyze it. Yet on the popular level, a lot of people believe it. So it's had a really profound influence on our culture without ever really being scrutinized too hard, by the smart people, because they just kind of brush it off as you're crazy. Yet at the same time, if you look at the polls, but just some of the kind of polls that they've done in the last, 5 years or so, about 50% of Americans believe that there are people living on other planets, some kind of aliens. So it's like half the population in America believes this, that there are ETs. Now, just a little lower than that, I think it's like maybe 45, 46%, something like that, believe they've already visited here in UFOs. So, without even landing on the White House lawn, this phenomenon has already gotten nearly half of the American population to believe in aliens.
Right.
Okay? And that's pretty good, considering it didn't.
Well, that's extraordinary. We, like you say, we've been set up by technology, by all the TV things, all the new media, and things coming out, and they're crossing. They're teaching us, things like werewolves are okay, vampires are okay, aliens are okay. You know what I'm saying? And these things are being pushed forward at such a dramatic rate. Well, Chris, we're going to go to a break in about 50 seconds or less. And I want you to tell us where we can find this new book at, and tell us where your website's at if that's not the same place. But I do want your website also.
Sure. Well, the easy thing to do is the book is XOEXO Vaticana, or Vatican, VATICANA, exovaticana.com. That's the publisher's site that we set up. Or Tom Horn's main news site, RaidersNewsUpdate.com. And the book is also at bookstores like Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com and Books A Million. But exovaticana.com will give you a video and a lot of information about the book as well.
All right, but folks, I also want you to check out your website, which is what?
My personal website, where I have posted on this book and other subjects on Christian theology and eschatology and apologetics, is logosapologia.org. That's LOGOSAPOLOGIA.org.
Okay, we'll be right back in 3 minutes, folks. Or for $149.99. That's right, delivered for $149.99. That's the shipping and the system, $149.99. Call 541-225-4659. That's 541-225-4659. Or visit AmericanVoiceRadio.com and click Satellite System. Food prices going up, homes being foreclosed, unemployment insurance running out, jobs leaving the country. Many people cannot afford to eat or keep a roof over their head. Too many can do neither. Messiah's Branch has a mission church in Wichita, Kansas that helps the victims of this banker's economy, the American people. Your neighbors. The mission is the last hope for so many Americans. We need your help to lift up the poorest of the poor. These are men, women, and children who once had homes, now in the street. They all need what you need: first aid, beds, food, clothing, and so on. You can send a monetary gift or a box of necessities to 230 West 4th Street, Florence, Kansas, 66851. Or donate online by going to WichitaHomeless.com, or simply call 316-619-4886. 316-619-4886. That are your neighbors that need your help, not only in my city, but yours. Men, women, and children crying for the help, wondering why good Christians do not come to their aid. I know this because I minister to these people, and they say such. They say, Pastor Dan, why is it the Christian church isn't coming out here and helping us as commanded by our Father? We need your help, as the mission church is open only due to your listeners. As we minister to the poor, they can't support and do what they can. You understand? We need your help. We're trying to get the Women's Overflow open as soon as possible. Right now, I know as a fact there's at least 20 women out there that need to get inside, and we can all give them a roof if we get the door open. We need your help, of course. Someone asked, does the bus still need repairs? Yes, the answer for that is yes, it still needs repairs, but daylight savings kind of saved me because we don't have taillights, but it gets dark later. And they said, well, the heater. Well, yeah, the heater's still broken, but now it's warmer out. So, yeah, we still need help with the bus. So many people ask us, well, why do they come to us for help? Well, love is the first answer, of course. People are treated as family. And the second and beyond that is that we have no set guidelines like programs. People just walk in the door and ask. That's the rule. When we help people if we have the way to fill that need. If we don't have a way to do it, we pray it in. This is why the agencies tell all their employees about Father's Little Mission Church. You see, when guidelines stop them from helping, they send them to us. People who have millions in their budgets send people to a place that really has no budget. We are the last hope for so many. And folks, we are all responsible to care one for another as we are our brother's keepers. All donations, no matter what size, helps. And the Father notices all donations that come from your heart. So you can donate online or by mailing a check or money order. And you can find all this information at prophecyhour.com, prophecyhour.com. Or you can call me at 620-878-4682 if you need to. And at prophecyhour.com, you'll find links for all kinds of things, radio programs. You'll also find a link to our Wichita Homeless website, which is wichitahomeless.com, if you want to check out that. Anyway, enough of my talking. Let's now bring on Chris Putnam, and he's talking about his new book. Are you still there with me, Chris?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Very good. Anyway, now we just started talking about how easy it would be to deceive the other half of the people if something landed on the White House lawn or maybe the lawn of the Vatican. Or does the Vatican even have a lawn?
I think they do have even gardens or some there. Yeah, that's interesting that you brought that up. You know, you probably heard about the Fatima sighting, right? In 1917, the famous third secret of Fatima and all that. Well, yeah. You know, what's really interesting to me about that thing is that, you know, you read the accounts, they say that like around 70,000 people witnessed this thing they call the miracle of the sun, which happened on October 13th of 1917. Now, what they described seeing obviously was not the sun. You know, they say they saw a gray disk swirling and dancing in the sky, and you know, like a cascade of rainbow colors came out. You know, supposedly they say this is the sun dancing in the sky, but I mean, obviously it wasn't, because you think about it, no one saw it outside of this field in Fatima, Portugal. If it was the sun, the whole world would have been aware of it. In fact, you know, because we live in a solar system, if the sun had actually danced in the sky, the Earth probably would have been destroyed from the gravitational forces. So, you know, it's obviously not the sun, but something was spinning around in the sky that looked like a ball or a disc. And, you know, in 1917, they didn't really have any vocabulary like flying saucer or UFO, but I mean, I think that's exactly what it was. It really sounds like it. We had a mass UFO sighting. And that's really what they're associating with these prophecies. Now, the prophecies, no one heard these except 3 children, age 7 to 10. Ages 7 to 10. Why does this thing always channel messages through impressionable young children? Now, you know, Catholics might say, well, they're innocent, but they're also very impressionable and gullible. You know, they don't really have critical thinking skills. You know, you tell something to a little kid, you know, between ages 7 and 10, and they'll buy into it, especially, you know, saying that it's the Virgin Mary or whatever. Now, if you look at some of the theological content of what these children reported, the first thing that happened was this entity told them that they needed to make sacrifices for the sins of their people. So literally, they told the children to hurt themselves. You know, they would be, you know, castigating themselves as a way to work off the sins of other people. Now, that's not consistent with the New Testament message where Jesus died for our sins. You know, we don't have to beat ourselves and for the sins of other people. That doesn't do anything. So the sort of theology that you hear coming, from that message is, I think, antithetical to sound, Christian theology. So I'm very suspect of any of the secrets that come out of that. But where I was going with that is, you mentioned the law of the Vatican. Well, it's kind of funny. So in 1950, right, literally 33 years later, Pope Pius XII, he was thinking about, he wanted to promulgate this new doctrine. It was an old legend, that probably developed around the 2nd or the 3rd century AD, that says that Mary ascended bodily into heaven, sort of like what we read about Jesus, in the book of Acts, at the end of Luke's gospel. Jesus ascends to heaven. Well, the Catholics have this doctrine called the Assumption of Mary, which is basically that she bodily ascended into heaven as well. But that wasn't promulgated as an official church dogma until 1950. Now, the thing that's really interesting is that Pius claimed that he saw the same sort of thing in the sky above the Vatican gardens in 1950. And that's what inspired him to promulgate that doctrine. So quite literally, the Pope had a UFO sighting over Rome, and then that inspired him to promulgate a doctrine that all Catholics have to believe. So in a very real way, we have a UFO dictating theology that millions of people are supposed to swallow. I find that kind of astounding.
That is astounding. And, these guys are so gullible. I mean, I read my Bible, and so, I'm not gullible to that. I believe that those things are demonic in nature and so on and so forth. And these guys are supposed to do super studies or whatever, but they believe this garbage. That's probably because they're not really rooted in faith in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's, just this long tradition, really, and some of it's superstition maybe, but yeah, I think that they've been deceived. And that was really a fundamental premise in our book, Petrus Romanus. I really covered a lot of church history, and I think I made a really strong case that you can see where the Roman church turned a corner. Jesus always said, "My kingdom is not of this world," and we don't fight the way the world fights.
Right.
But you see, right around between 600 and 700 AD, that far back, the Roman Catholic Church became a political power. They even acquired land and became a country in 756 AD. So they literally became kings. And, that's where you start seeing the violence and the inquisitions and the wars. And these are not the sort of things that Jesus taught us to do. And he never wanted the church to be a power that was out imprisoning and torturing them. You can't coerce someone into faith. That just doesn't work. So I think when they turned that corner, they really did sell their souls in a very real way, in a theological way. But I'm not saying that all Catholics are lost, but I think that the leadership kind of made a deal with the devil when they became a worldly force.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's not too much of a stretch. And for the record, something I wanted to say earlier, that you say that, and I agreed with you about the Pope, in all probability is not, I don't know if it's this Pope, but the Pope being the false prophet, but there are some other people out there that believe that. I know Stan of the Prophecy Club, Dmitry Gudeman, I don't know if you ever heard of him. That's basically was the belief that came from his prophecies also. And so, yeah, the Vatican is going to be a major player in these end times.
Absolutely. And, one thing that we found out since Pope Francis was elected, the thing that's really interesting about him is that he's the first Jesuit Pope ever. Okay, so all these astronomers, this board group, they're all Jesuits. The people running this observatory, they're all Jesuits. Well, Pope Francis started out, he got a master's degree in chemistry. He was a scientist before he became a Jesuit. Isn't that interesting? Well, guess what else? The leader of the Vatican Observatory Research Group, his name is Jose Funes, and he's from Argentina. And guess who brought him into the Jesuit order? Pope Francis is the one that brought him into the Jesuit order. which is it's kind of chilling because I mean we didn't know who the new pope was going to be when we wrote Ex Vaticana. We were just going on this premise that we really thought, you know, all the statements the Vatican has been making about aliens. They had an astrobiology conference in Rome at the Pontifical Academy of Sciences in the year 2009. They literally invited the top secular scientists in the world. I mean, atheists, you know, not Catholics. These are people that, you know, are hardcore astrobiology type people and philosophers. They brought all these fellows to Rome to have a big conference on discussion of alien life. Now, at that conference, this was in 2009, one of the top astrobiologists in the country made an announcement. And he said that they were expecting to make a big announcement within a few short years. His name is Dr. Chris Empey at the University of Arizona. Now, he said a few short years, and that was in 2009. So that would put us, like, right now. You know, and I think what he was getting at, you know, like I said, they assume that these exoplanets could defy things, that they're going to run across life. Now, I don't think so. You know, and I explain astrobiology really carefully in the book. I try to break it down to where, you know, someone new to the subject can understand what we're talking about. But what I really made an effort to make a really strong case for is that the Earth is very unique. The Earth is uniquely situated in a number of ways to make it habitable, to make it, you know, to promote the existence of life and intelligent life. There's a lot of factors that have to come together. You know, what they're looking at is just water and the right temperature. And those are just two really small things. There's a lot of things that have to be in place. You have to have the right atmosphere. You know, you have to have, you know, actually the tectonic plates, the whole system of the way that our land masses move are very important for the production of the right minerals and things that support intelligent life. There's literally hundreds of factors that have to be within very narrow initial conditions for the Earth to support life. And so the sorts of statements these astrobiologists make about habitable zone and Goldilocks zone and life supporting, they're really misnomers because they don't really know that at all. So I think the existence of actual aliens is very minuscule. I don't want any of your listeners to be confused. We're not saying that these UFOs are aliens. We think that is a cover story for evil supernatural entities who are going to pose as aliens and come and lead the world into a lie. And once you accept that view, you see, a lot of people don't really realize what's happened to them. Once you've already bought into the thing that the UFOs really are aliens, that brings a whole bunch of other presuppositions that you might not be aware that you're accepting. And what those are these presuppositions like Darwinism, like life just pops into being on other planets. They have this thing they call the mediocrity principle. And this is actually, something that's taught in the science classroom. And what that is that the Earth and human beings and life on Earth is just mediocre. There's nothing special about it. And they really believe that. And so they reason, that since humans are just evolved monkeys, we're just evolved primates, there's really nothing special about our planet, there's nothing special about life, then there's no reason that all these other millions of planets that they speculate are up there, that life wouldn't just pop up there too. So, because we're mediocre, we shouldn't assume that it hasn't happened thousands of other times, and then why wouldn't they come visit us? Well, here's where it gets more problematic. One of the top demonologists, this is Monsignor Corrado Balducci. Now, he was the top demonologist for the Diocese of Rome. So he's there in Italy. He's a friend of Pope.
I think Russell Crowe's doing a movie on him now. One of the streams was saying that the other day, that Russell Crowe's doing a movie where he's that guy you just said, Betelgeuse or something.
John Paul II, they're very close. The title Monsignor is a high honor that you have to be given by the Pope. Now, his official role was exorcist demonologist. He came out in the Italian media. Now, you can even go on YouTube and find videos of this with with captions because he was speaking in Italian. There's Balbucci, Monsignor Corrado Balbucci. Now, he said way back in the late 90s that the existence of these beings is a certainty that we cannot doubt. Okay? He was like that sure. He wasn't tentative at all. Now, the Roman Catholic Church has never corrected him on that. They've never, said that he was a loose cannon. He's a very high-ranking official. He was going to UFO conventions and speaking. Now, he maintained that there was no chance that these entities were demons. He literally, I'll quote, here's a quote I have in front of me. We don't even have to waste a thought on the devil and his demons, who still kept their angelic nature, being fallen angels, and therefore are purely spiritual beings, since they are limited in their activity by God and therefore not able to bring their hatred on us. I don't know whose Bible he's reading, but mine says that the devil goes about like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour.
Yeah, absolutely. 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 It sounds like they're under the deception. So I guess I've just got to ask, we've got about 7 minutes left. So do you think they're going to believe an Antichrist that comes from a flying saucer, basically?
It's hard for me to tell you exactly how that scenario would work, but something like that. I think that there's going to be some sort of claim. It could be that big, huge, crash fly over major.
One thing with Catholics, they really defend their faith. So if the Pope springs out an Antichrist, there's going to be some Catholics that'll go along with it no matter what, and there'll be a few that turn away. There's got to be some that turn away. But, yeah, a lot of them will follow this. If the Pope tells them to, they'll believe that the Antichrist, this alien dude, is God.
Cities like Independence Day. I mean, there's actually been cases like that have happened. A lot of people don't really believe that, but it's absolutely true. I would tell you to look up Fife Symington. He was the governor of Arizona, okay? And there was a thing called the Phoenix Lights.
Yeah, I know the Phoenix Lights. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, massive UFO sighting. I mean, thousands of people saw it. But the governor of Arizona, he was an Air Force officer. He's given his testimony. He witnessed it too. And he said it was definitely like nothing he'd ever seen. He did not think it was of this world. But people described it as a mile-wide triangle-shaped craft. I mean, that's huge. And you have a strange Air Force officer who's the governor of the state who saw it. And he found it. So stuff like that has happened. So, I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. But it could also be a lot more subtle. It could be a lot more subtle, Pastor. What about, there's this claim that life started on Earth, what they call panspermia. Literally, panspermia. What that means is that life was seeded on Earth from outer space. Now, there's two versions. One version is like a meteorite with some microbes in the middle.
Hey, Scott, good to see you, mate.
And then the microbes evolved.
Good to see you, bro.
So that's called undirected panspermia.
Right.
But the problem with that is that it's literally impossible. The meteorites get so hot when we enter the atmosphere.
Sure.
They have a real hard time modeling how anything could live through the heat of the entry.
And you're still relying on a lot of evolution from, whatever could be in the
Yeah. Which I would dispute that as well. But so what is what they call directed panspermia. Now, that recent movie Prometheus kind of
I saw it.
Yeah, this is where aliens literally seed life on the Earth, and it's actually got a lot of respectability in scientific circles. So it could be something as subtle as some kind of evidence that conclusively shows that we were created by aliens, or that life came here from space. So it might be a lot more subtle than like an alien Antichrist or something really in your face like that. It could be something that really undermines the doctrine of creation in the Bible in such a fundamental way that just turns people away from that and do start to believe in these alien things. So it could be more subtle. And work on the worldview level.
Yeah. Well, I've seen several people I know, just a minute, several people I know believe that the Antichrist is going to be part a human being and part fallen angel, or alien. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's possible. The book of Revelation definitely says that he's empowered by the red dragon, right?
Right.
You know, he's either demon possessed or maybe he's some sort of hybrid. But I mean, the scripture is pretty clear that, you know, he is upon or controlled or perhaps even, you know, genetically so. So I don't think that's too much of a stretch given what we read in scripture. And, you know, it says that, you know, he's going to be able to do miracles. It says that he's going to claim to be God. And apparently a large part of the world's going to believe him. Now, here's another statistic I'll throw out that to me was just astonishing. You know, we talk about the strong delusion in Second Thessalonians 2. Well, right now, I saw this in the Huffington Post about a few months back. It was in 2012, right around December 2012. We did a survey in the UK. So, you know, Great Britain, Ireland, the whole United Kingdom. More people believe in extraterrestrials than God, literally. That's amazing. That's what the data said. They did a big sampling, and it was like 54% of the population believed in extraterrestrials, and only like maybe 46% or 45% believed in God. So literally, more people believe in ET in the UK than God. So the strong delusion is here now.
We're going to have to draw this up to a close. We got about a minute and a half. Final thought on that, and then tell us where to get the book. But oh, by the way, did you see that survey that came out a couple of days? I think WorldNet Daily did it and said 1 in every 4 Americans believe that Barack Obama is the Antichrist. Shows you what they know. Anyway, yeah, that's.
Okay, that's over. Chris Putnam died. Now this looks good. It's Josh Peck. Revelation 9 locusts is coming out of CERN, so it says. So let's see what they say. Should be interesting.
Life. That's what we're here to defend. Standing by everyone living with cancer, protecting life's moments for life. If you need to talk, call 13 11 20.
This winter, you'll find Caden being used by professionals who build Australia's most desirable homes. So
I decided to take all that stuff that I've written before, everything that I know about the locusts. Hey everybody, welcome to the Sharpening Report. I am your host, Josh Peck. Tonight we actually have me as the guest. I was asked a while ago through a YouTube comment if I could re-upload a video that unfortunately YouTube had deleted. It was back in the days of Peck Underground Church, which we actually have talked about possibly reviving. So we might be doing that. But it was about what the locusts are in Revelation 9, how it might connect with CERN and some emerging technologies and things like that. I did a really long 3.5-hour teaching on that. Don't worry, this is not going to be that long. At least I don't think so. But unfortunately, YouTube deleted it and I didn't have a backup copy. It was actually one of the reasons that caused me to start Daily Renegade and do what we're doing now in the way that we're doing it. So that if YouTube does delete a video, we'll have it backed up at the website, dailyrenegade.com for members. But I was asked in a comment if I could re-upload that. So I decided, you know, I can't re-upload it, unfortunately, because I don't have it. The entire teaching, a lot of that was a kind of a spontaneous Bible study. So it was me going through the scriptures and then kind of talking about things that would come up in my memory, things that I've studied before while I was reading the scriptures, and it wasn't like from a list of notes or like a script or anything like that. So what I decided to do today, instead of trying to do that again, because a lot of it was kind of haphazard, and you know, it was more of an organic kind of Bible study than it was an actual solid point by point teaching. So I decided to take all that stuff that I've written before, everything that I know about the locusts, Revelation 9, CERN, how these things might connect, and how this could be fulfilled in the future. Also, how Revelation 9 connects with the book of Ezekiel, with Ezekiel's vision in chapter 1, how it shows the identity of these locusts, actually. the species of angels or spiritual beings that these things are, where they come from, what they're going to do, that kind of thing. I decided to just put all of that together. Oh, what the faces represent in Ezekiel, lots of cool stuff. But I decided to just put that all together in a note-by-note kind of thing, so I can actually give you a teaching. So while I can't re-upload that video, what this is going to be is so much better than that, because this is going to be point by point. It's not going to be long gaps of me looking up Bible verses and trying to figure things out. It's not going to be organic like that. It's going to be more of a solid teaching. So that's what I wanted to do today for the sharpening report. I rarely ever just do this show by myself without a guest, but when I do, I've noticed that people tend to enjoy it, and I've actually had some people ask me to do more of that. So if you do want more of that kind of thing, by the way, I do host JPD Weekly, which is a show that's basically the sharpening report without a guest. It's just me kind of talking about Bible things. Oh, and real quick, I probably should mention too that the other reason I'm doing this is I'm trying to get a bunch of episodes done ahead of time, which will all be available at dailyrenegade.com, but you always get early access if you're a member there. But I'm doing this because my wife and I, Christina and I, we're expecting any time now our 5th child, Anya Rain Peck. So this will be my 3rd daughter, 5th child, and we're expecting Anya anytime. So she's about to be born. I want to make sure that I have enough of these made and recorded ahead of time, so you guys don't have to lose out on anything, and I don't have to worry about things for a little while. So please keep us all in prayer over that. That would be great. Okay, now we can jump into it. Believe it or not, this study begins in quantum physics. It begins with a particle called a graviton. And what does gravitons have to do with the Revelation 9 locusts? You will see. It's actually really cool, this connection. But the graviton is probably one of the strangest theoretical particles ever hypothesized. Now, I say theoretical because gravitons have never been directly observed, but physicists are confident in their existence because of the presence of the gravitational field. So every field produces a particle. And it would be weird if the gravitational field was the only one that didn't do that. So because there is a gravitational field, it is possible that a soon discovery might take place by means of particle colliders like the LHC at CERN. So basically what happens there, they collide particles together, all that energy ripples out into the surrounding quantum fields, and when a quantum field has energy or ripples, that ripple is a particle. That's what a particle actually is. So the idea is put a bunch of energy into the surrounding fields and see what particles come out of that. So it's possible a graviton could be discovered that way or observed that way, because that's how lots of particles have been discovered, such as the Higgs boson. Now, gravitons, they're obviously the particles associated with gravity. Gravity in itself is still kind of a mystery in a lot of respects. But due to scientific advancements, the world might not be too far off from the holy grail of physics, definitive proof that the graviton actually exists and the means to study its properties. Now, what makes the graviton especially interesting is its apparent ability to flow between spatial dimensions. So along with other potential discoveries, the graviton is obviously at the top of the LHC's to-do list. CERN's very interested in this. But gravitons seem to be able to, it doesn't seem like they're rooted into our reality in the way that other particles are. They seem to be able to flow in and out between dimensions. It might be part of the reason why gravity is so weak compared to the other forces. And that's a big question in physics. It could be because gravity's, in a sense, leaking into these other dimensions. So that could be a part of it. So gravitons seem to be able to not have to be bound by our dimensions of physical reality. So keep that in mind, because that's interesting. So the idea is not always to just look for the graviton itself, but to look for a gap where particles should be after a collision. So the two particle detectors of the LHC at CERN, which are called CMS and ATLAS, they're able to show us the aftermath of a particle
Okay, Talia, good to see you, sis. Thanks for joining. See you tomorrow, hopefully.
collision. So, as in any collision, debris is kind of thrown out and distributed pretty evenly. That's kind of a crude way of saying it. Really, it's kind of it's sort of created. But anyway, if the detector shows a gap where debris or new particles should be, but there's a gap there, that could be evidence that they've escaped into a higher dimension. That could be evidence that those are gravitons, because for a lot of reasons, they suspect that gravitons can actually do this. Now, there's an idea that gravitons can be used as a way to communicate with beings of higher dimensions. And of course, like any scientific theory or idea, it gets popularized in media, in Hollywood. So if you remember the movie Interstellar, they kind of explored this idea. Now, they crossed some things. You know, I mean, I love that movie, by the way, but they kind of mixed up the fourth dimension of, of space and the dimension of time. And there's always confusion there. Is time the fourth dimension? Well, yes and no. It depends on how you define dimension. If you're only talking about dimensions of space, there's no reason to really think that time is a spatial dimension. There's some models where it could be seen that way, but there's no real reason to think that. It could be, but by and large, when they say it's the fourth dimension, it just means of all the dimensions that we know, spatial and temporal, time is the fourth one that we just list out. So it's more of kind of a subjective thing. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But we saw that idea explored in Interstellar. And again, that might sound like the stuff of science fiction, but physicists today are seriously considering this possibility. If gravitons are discovered and used as a way to communicate with beings of higher dimensions or parallel universes, this might be what tells us that the world the world that we know of it, our world, that we're not alone. It might be the thing to tell us that we're not alone in this world. While many are waiting for a type of disclosure event of UFOs, which actually we've gotten quite a bit of that in recent years, but a lot of people are waiting for that. They're waiting for spacecrafts to be discovered or UFOs and sightings and stuff. We might actually be surprised to find out that these beings pretending or presenting themselves are going to show up in a different way. And so we got to think about that. It might not be that the aliens are from another planet. It might be that the aliens are from another dimension. And that might begin with an established communication through gravity, through gravitons, because again, gravitons can go between dimensions. They don't have to be rooted in ours. Now, in September of 2015, for the first time ever, if you guys remember this, gravitational waves were detected. Now, before that time, gravity waves, gravitons, and the gravitational quantum field have been largely speculative and theoretical. Gravitons have never really been directly observed before then. The effects of gravitation, the gravitational field, are seen every day, of course. If you drop a ball, it falls. But without actually observing the waves or particles of gravity itself, there's a limit to what can be learned and accomplished. But now that waves of gravity have actually been detected, there's no telling what the ramifications will be. And keep in mind, this happened 5 or 6 years ago. We know that technology can come about really fast, especially when scientists are motivated to do something. So these things can come about pretty fast. What might be available now that we are not aware of? I mean, you can only guess. Now, this detection was achieved by the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, or LIGO for short. The actual waves were created by the merging of two black holes, the collision. One the mass of 29 suns, and the other the mass of 36 suns. So each black hole is estimated as being about 30 miles in diameter. Gravity waves, by and large, these gravity waves, they're so weak that it takes an extremely sensitive detector like LIGO to be able to detect these things. LIGO can measure distortions as small as 1,000th the size of a proton, which is just an unimaginable small size. The gravity waves that LIGO detected lasted only 1/5 of a second. And even more amazing, the detection happened at greater than a 5 sigma standard of proof, which is it's pretty big. I mean, it means basically the sigma standard that quantum physicists use. Everything is based on probability. So everything, there's a like, if you flip a coin and 50% of the time it comes up heads, 50% of the time it comes up tails. Well, that's what you would expect. Nothing weird is going on. If you flip a coin and 100, or let's say 99% of the time it comes up heads, something's going on. There's something wrong with that. There is something that is affecting the outcome of the coin, right? And so that's kind of like the sigma test. So when they detect things, the way that they can tell an actual discovery from things that are already known or from just background noise is they use the sigma test. And a 5 sigma is a really high standard. So that's how they're able to discover things and show that, like, yeah, this is not background noise. This is exactly what we think it is, or at least there's a very high probability that it is. So that's how they're able to tell. Now, on one hand, that discovery is really exciting. I mean, after all, any aspect of God's creation that can be detected, that can be shown, that can be learned from, that's really exciting. But another piece of his grand design can now be understood a little bit better because of this discovery. But that could turn into troubling news if and when mankind decides to use this knowledge for dangerous and potentially disastrous goals. When you look at the goals that they have at CERN, not all of them are respecting of God. So what could this discovery bring? And I promise this is leading to the locusts, but what could this discovery bring? Now, David Rizzi, executive director of LIGO, has said, quote, "What's really exciting is what comes next. I think we're opening a window on the universe, a window of gravitational wave astronomy," end quote. Kip Thorne, which is Caltech's Richard P. Feynman Professor of Theoretical Physics, emeritus, is also quoted as saying something nearly identical, that this discovery is opening a new window on the universe. Gravitational wave astronomy and new branches of quantum physics are interesting windows, but what if some of the other windows, that might be opened? Is it possible a dimensional window or door might be open that can't be closed? So that brings us back to the certain goals of some physicists, not all, actually not even most, but some that are in control and are deciding what happens with the machine and things like that. Their goals: to develop a gravitational communication system, which again sounds insane, but this is the kind of stuff that they talk about. There are steps towards that goal that must be taken by them. There's got to be steps. They can't just decide to create one of these things. So there's steps. So first would be the confirmed discovery of gravitational waves or gravitons themselves. Now that happened already 5 or 6 years ago. Next would be learning to repeat the detection in a lab by creating gravitons or gravity waves. They would do this by putting Einstein's general theory to the test directly and experimentally. But now, once that's accomplished, there should be enough information to go on to learn how to manipulate the gravitons themselves. Now, interestingly enough, this detection of gravitational waves occurred in September of 2015, but wasn't officially announced until 6 months later on February 11th, 2016. Now, the reason is because they have to do testing. They have to make sure it's a legitimate discovery, and sometimes that takes time. But that does lead us to wonder what else has been accomplished right now and not yet announced, because that kind of thing happens often. A discovery will happen and it'll take months. It could even be longer, for all we know, for it to be announced. So could these discoveries spur on the opening of the abyss in Revelation chapter 9? Only time will tell for sure, but by the looks of it, we're not too far from knowing for sure. So this leads us to wonder what the world might look like after an interdimensional communication is established? We might have the answer in the prophetic book of Revelation from the prophet John. Revelation 9:1-3 states, "And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power." Now, the first thing to notice here is that this occurs when the fifth angel sounds. In my book, Unraveling the Multiverse, I explored the possibility of the number of cherubim faces in Ezekiel's vision representing spatial dimensions. And we absolutely will look at that in this episode a little bit later. But if we include time, it's correct to say that we are four-dimensional beings. Again, it goes back to that classification of dimensions that we talked about at the beginning. But you can classify it as that. We inhabit three dimensions of space and one of time. So if you count it that way, we're four-dimensional beings. Now, if you follow that logic, we might have a reference to a being of an extra dimension in the fifth trumpet of Revelation, 4 of space and 1 of time. So 4 of space and 1 of time. Fifth dimensional being. And again, so that equals 5. Just as if you add time, we're 4-dimensional, 3 spatial, 1 temporal. This angel could be 5-dimensional, 4 spatial, and 1 temporal. So I also write in Unraveling the Multiverse about the theory that when the rebellious angels fell from heaven, that they may have fallen to what we would call the 4th spatial dimension, which would be 1 dimension just above ours. Not literally above, but there's no other real word for it. It would actually be all around us. But the angel sounding the trumpet is likely not a fallen angel, but instead might be signaling that a fallen being is about to come into the picture. Because the rest of the verse of Revelation 9 states, quote, "And I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit." So that's no ordinary star. Now, according to our modern vernacular, any star, literal star that would fall on the earth would utterly destroy the earth. End of story. We're all dead at that point. So there doesn't seem to be, but there does seem to be a connection between stars and angels. And at times the word star can actually represent an angel. And we see this alluded to in Revelation 1:20, which says, "The mystery of the 7 stars which thou sawest in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches." Now, there, while it says angel, we don't necessarily know if angel is a spiritual being or just a human messenger, because angel really just means messenger. There are spiritual messengers and there are physical human messengers. But again, there does seem to be this connection between stars and angels throughout Scripture. Now, we can also see the star is a being of some sort because of the words "unto him was given the key." So the star being referred to with the pronoun him shows that this is a person of some sort. Maybe not human, certainly not, because it's falling from heaven. That could be that it's a fallen angel, like literally fallen, rebelling against God, or it could be that it's sent from heaven with a message because it's a messenger, it's an angel. But it is a being, a person, either spiritual of some sort. So don't equate the word person with human. Person doesn't always mean human. Person just means like a conscious being of some sort. So this could be a person, being, but something of 4 spatial dimensions rather than 3. Now, why am I saying 4 rather than 3? We are going to look at that. We have to go to Ezekiel for that, but we are going to look at that a little bit later. So just hold that in your mind. But this is most likely referring to a fallen angel because of the fallen description, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could just be an angel sent by God. So that's a little up in the air. Now, verse 2 tells us that the angel opened the bottomless pit with the key. That word key is interesting. It comes from the Greek word kleis and can be used as a metaphor for authority. So it might not be a literal key, but it might be authority. So in a sense, this fallen angel was given permission or authority to open the bottomless pit. And we also learn in Revelation 1:18 that Jesus Christ himself held the keys of death and hell. So most likely it was Jesus who granted this authority. It would have to be, right? Now, we may ask, why would Jesus give permission for a fallen angel, if it is a fallen angel, or even a non-rebellious angel, to open the bottomless pit? But if it was a fallen angel, why would he allow that? We find the answer in chapter 2, verses 2 through 11 in the book of Joel. And this is a little bit of a long section, but it's worth reading. So I'll read it now. Again, it's 2 through 11, book of Joel. A day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains. A great people and a strong, there hath not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness, yea, and nothing shall escape them. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so shall they run. Like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of a flame of fire that devoureth the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. Before their face the people shall be much pained, all faces shall gather blackness. They shall run like mighty men, they shall climb the wall like men of war, and they shall march every one on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Neither shall one thrust another, they shall walk every one in his path, and when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. They shall run to and fro in the city. They shall run upon the wall. They shall climb up upon the houses. They shall enter in at the windows like a thief. The earth shall quake before them. The heavens shall tremble. The sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. And the Lord shall utter his voice before his army, for his camp is very great. For he is strong that executeth his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible, and who can abide it? Now, we can learn a lot of truths from that passage, but for our purposes here, we only need to note a couple of things. First, as we'll see later in further detail, notice this army is described in many of the same ways as the locust army of Revelation 9, and very well could be the same. It might be. We don't know for sure, because again, we have to remember that fallen beings were originally obedient created beings from God. You know, they were obedient. How much did their appearance change when they fell? We don't know for sure. So, but it's likely the very same army. And we also read in verse 8 of their immortality, that when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. That shows immortality. It shows that these are likely angelic in nature. Now, we don't know if these are the good guys or the bad guys, but with all the descriptions that are similar to the locusts in Revelation 9, it seems like these might be the bad guys. Although we also know that God does send the good angels too to execute his judgments. So it's still up in the air. You know, I don't know that for sure. When I wrote Unraveling the Multiverse, if I remember right, I believe I took the stance that these were fallen, that these were against God, but God was utilizing them, because he does do that sometimes in the scripture. He has utilized the enemy before. That doesn't mean that he practices evil or does anything evil, but again, God is in control of everything. These things are still under his control, and he can use them as he sees fit. There's even places where, you know, God's given permission for a supernatural being to go and be a lying spirit. So, you know, that kind of thing has happened before. It doesn't mean that God himself lies or practices in sin, but we also have, you know, what you sow, you will reap. That's like a principle in the Bible. If you sow lies into the world, you're going to get lies back. So a lot of that can be God's justice, God's perfect, holy, and righteous judgment. So, given the description of the circumstances surrounding these beings, we have sun, moon, and stars darkened, clouds of thick darkness, etc. They seem to be the very same locust beings from Revelation 9. Again, there is an argument that says that in Joel these are the heavenly angelic army of God, and that could be too, or it could, you know, there's different ways it could play out, but they seem to be the same locust beings from Revelation 9. But also notice that Joel 2:11 says that this is the Lord's army. So how can this be? Again, like I said, there are times in the Bible where God will use the enemy for his own purposes. He's ultimately in control of these things anyway. He can use them however he sees fit. In the book of Exodus, we read that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, Exodus 9:12. We also read later in Revelation chapter 9, quote, "And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men." So, as we can see there are times where the Lord absolutely will use the enemy to fulfill his own purposes. Those four angels bound at the Euphrates, those aren't good guys, because why would good guys be bound? You know,
yeah.
these are angels that are under some kind of judgment, and they're set loose.
Yep.
So the Lord absolutely does use the enemy sometimes to fulfill his own purposes, usually in the way of judgment. And the locust army is no different. So before they're unleashed into our world, this gravitational communication aspect becomes more obvious when we consider these prophecies. It's at least a possibility, all right? Like, I would not go and build an entire doctrine on this, but it's at least one way that this could play out. It's possible that the LHC at CERN will detect evidence of gravitons, which in turn could lead to a communication device to higher dimensional entities. And again, I know that sounds nuts, but there have been many physicists that have gone on record to say that they do want to try and communicate with higher dimensions. They want to first discover them and see if they're there. They want to probe them and explore, and they want to communicate. I don't know if it still is, but for a long time, that was right on CERN's website as one of their top goals. It was either CERN or it was the new particle collider that they were building in China, I believe. But one of the particle colliders, I believe I have it. I believe I wrote about it in Abbott on Ascending, a book that I wrote with Dr. Thomas Horn. But in that, me and Tom talked about it, and I think I have that quote in there. But one of the particle colliders. So this is a goal that these types of people have. Now, again, not every physicist is going to believe this. Most don't. Most just want to learn about God's creation. I mean, there are actually Christians that work at CERN. I'm good friends with one of them, at least. But so most of the people that work at CERN, I don't think have anything to do with this. But there are people in power. There are people that do have these goals, and they talk about them openly. Now, what particle but a graviton could best represent fallen angels? So if this communication device to a higher dimensional entity requires gravitons to operate, because gravitons can transcend dimensions, what better particle than a graviton to represent a fallen angel? We even have reference to falling, in effect caused by gravity, in the description of the star angel that opens the bottomless pit. So we can look at it there. Now, there's an Abaddon and Ezekiel antithesis that I want to get into. It's entirely possible that these locusts are the direct antithesis or just opposite of the cherubim Ezekiel saw in chapter 1 of his book. So the idea behind this is, for everything God has, Satan has an evil and inferior duplicate to that thing. So Satan has never had an original thought of his own. All he does is twist what God already has. So the Antichrist is an antithesis of of our Savior, of Jesus, of the Christ, the real Christ. So antithesis of Christ, Antichrist. Satan's never had an original thought of his own, so he borrows from God. Now, when we look closely at the description of these locusts and compare it to Ezekiel's vision, because remember, in chapter 1, Ezekiel saw the good guys, the throne guardians, the throne cherubim of God. And these are the good guys. But when we compare those cherubim, the good non-fallen cherubim of Ezekiel's vision, to the locust, we actually see that they're complete opposites. They have similar characteristics, but the characteristics are twisted. They're opposite. So the locust army is very likely comprised of fallen cherubim. That's what I think these things are. They're most likely described as locusts because of the destructive role that they play, not necessarily because of their physical appearance, which is described in Revelation 9:7 as, quote, "And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle," end quote. Now, in my book Unraveling the Multiverse, I show that the cherubim seem to be an amalgamation of human and animal appearances, and we'll look at that a little bit later when we look at the faces of Ezekiel and see what is really going on there, what that might be representing. Other ancient cultures have seem to have witnessed these beings as well, and they wrote about them and even drew them in like wall reliefs and things. There's the Lamassu and Shadu of ancient Assyria. And those beings were described as having an animal body, like a bull or a lion, with wings and a human head. Now, in Ezekiel's vision of the cherubim, we see the opposite. Ezekiel describes animal heads atop human-like winged bodies. So it's like the bad guys are the direct antithesis of this. We also see in Ezekiel's vision that one of the faces is described as being half human, half lion, and bisected vertically. However, Revelation 9:7-8 says, quote, "And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, and their faces were faces of men, and they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions." Now, if they
I just looked it up on Google. Megatron, you're right.
Had faces of men like teeth, but they had teeth of lions, it would suggest also a half human, half lion face. But instead of being bisected vertically like Ezekiel's vision, like the good guys, this is by.
Yeah, I thought there was a Gravitron, to be honest. I'd seen a couple of the Transformers movies. I only remember Optimus Prime, though, and Bumblebee. They're the only two I remember the names of.
Sected horizontally. Lions' teeth, faces of men. So that could be another attribute to show that these locusts are an antithesis to the heavenly cherubim that Ezekiel witnessed. Because again, in Ezekiel, and we will look at it a little later, but in Ezekiel, he said that like on the left half or on the right half, however he described it, but vertically on one side was a lion, on one side was a human. That is a vertical bisection, but here in Revelation, it's a horizontal bisection. And again, that's one of those things that we read over and we don't piece together, but when we do look at it, when we do piece it together, it tells us quite a bit about who these beings are. Now, Ezekiel also described the heavenly cherubim as carrying the throne of God on top of them. If you remember Ezekiel chapter 1, which again we'll look at, but if you just by way of just remembering, if you think back to what that vision was, and if you never read it, that's okay, because I can just explain it to understand this point. He saw 4 of these cherubim, and on top of them, they were carrying the throne of God. And this whole thing, this whole construct is God's chariot, his throne chariot. So they're just remember that they're carrying God on top of them. Now, Revelation 9:11 says, quote, "And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon." Now, a lot of times we focus on those names, Abaddon and Apollyon, but what did it say just before that? It says they had a king over them. And a lot of times we tend to think that that's like authority, like there's a king ruling over them. And it does mean that, but that word over, it actually comes from the Greek word epi, which can mean upon, as well as represent statements of authority. So there are times that the Bible uses the word epi to describe something physically on top of something else without regard to authoritative position at all. So much how the heavenly cherubim were carrying the true God over them, these fallen cherubim seem to be carrying their false god and king Abaddon above them. It's a direct antithesis of the throne chariot of God. So Abaddon has a throne chariot too, but these things are being carried by his throne chariot is being carried by the fallen cherubim in Revelation 9. And for an example of that word epi, whenever Satan took Jesus on top of the temple, when it says that, when it describes that, it uses that word epi, on top of, so on the temple. It has nothing to do with authority. So it could be saying that, but it sounds like that Satan or Abaddon, I mean, likely a different being altogether, but Abaddon has a antithesis of God's chariot, of God's throne. And that's what's being described here in Revelation 9. So this idea links us back to what we talked about earlier, and I've written about before, the possible connections between CERN and Abaddon in ancient history. And there are connections to that. The very first chapter of Abaddon Ascending actually goes really in depth into that if you want more information on that. Now, as pointed out in my book, Cherubim Chariots, and then later Unraveling the Multiverse, the ancient world likely had direct contact with fallen cherubim. I mean, they drew these things all the time and they described them. But again, they called them things like Lamassu and Shadu, and they're the antithesis, they're the opposite of what the good guys look like. So in the Bible, the good guys look like humanoid bodies with animal heads. In the ancient world, these Lamassu and Shadus, they are animal bodies with human heads. Really weird.
Wow, that's a good pickup. That's true. That's a really good pickup.
It's a direct antithesis. It's an opposite. So it's possible that the book of Revelation is prophesying a return of these fallen creatures. And it's also possible, if interdimensional contact is made through the use of gravitons, that it'll be either these fallen cherubim or the king over them that humanity will actually be in contact with. So if CERN has anything to do with prophecy, this could be it. I don't know for sure that CERN does, but it might not even be CERN. Once this discovery is made, how to utilize gravitons, any private company could use that information and build something like this. So it might not even be CERN that does it, but it seems like eventually some type of communication is made. And we see echoes of this all throughout history. I think even, what was it? I think Thomas Edison maybe was trying to create like a ghost phone thing where you could call spirits of the dead. I mean, this kind of thing has been in the background of human science.
I've actually invented that now, a ghost phone.
All throughout time. Humans have always wanted to communicate with other spirits and things.
I think they call them EVP machines.
So why not use technology to try to do that? And I think that there are people that would, and being that gravitons can transcend dimensions, if once we get to the point where we can understand gravitons enough, why wouldn't people try to do that? Why wouldn't people use gravitons to try to communicate? It'd be easy to do if you can manipulate them. All you'd have to do, you could send a message by just altering the spin, and then you have like a 1 and a 0. You can do a binary code and send a string of gravitons, each with different spins, 1s and 0s, or a Morse code type of thing. And you can send that as a message, then just set up a receiver and see if something comes back. So there are ways that this could be done, and it's likely that people will try to do it. Now, whether that has anything to do with prophecy, I can't say for sure, but it seems like a possibility that we should keep our eyes on. Now, as I show in my book, Abaddon Ascending, again, that I wrote with Tom Horn, if you're interested, you can go to skywatchtvstore.com and get that. But the area where CERN is located today is thought to have been dedicated to that same false god, Apollyon, Apollo, Abaddon, in ancient times. And they actually had, when they were constructing it, they had to halt construction because they found all these artifacts and things dedicated to Apollo. So it could be that dedication will manifest itself in the near future. So it's weird that at the same spot where CERN is right now, that is where this fallen being, Apollyon, was actually venerated and worshipped. And they actually had a spot at that location that they called the bottomless pit. So it's like it's too many connections, it's too many coincidences to just be coincidence. So we might actually see a modern day repeat of the Tower of Babel and a fulfillment of Zechariah 5 in our near future. And if you want a really interesting study, you should look that up. And I think I do actually have Bible studies on that somewhere online. But if not, just let me know and I'll dedicate. We'll do a whole Zechariah 5 study either here or on JPD Weekly. I think that would be a good thing to do. But the idea behind all of this is that it's possible the mechanism of opening the abyss, at least on the human physical side, is to open a communication system with gravitons and to breach this barrier between dimensions in order to explore what's there. And then while that's happening on the physical side, On the spiritual side, God is allowing humans to do this, and an angel is permitted to open the bottomless pit, thereby releasing these horrific fallen cherubim on the world. So it's sort of like God saying, all right, you want to contact extra dimensional entities that I clearly separated you for your own protection. You don't want my protection? Then fine, you'll get exactly what you want. Here's the false gods you keep going after. Let's see how they treat you. And then at that point, hell is literally poured out on Earth.
I don't know any Australian preppers. I do Canadian prepper because he's got his finger on the pulse with the politics and the war, the food shortage. So he's quite informative. So that's, yeah. I don't know any Aussie preppers, to be honest.
Now, of course, the bottomless pit and the release of the locust prophecy in Revelation 9 might not have anything to do with CERN, so I don't want to create a spirit of fear around CERN and around particle colliders and stuff like that. I don't want to do that. Even if we as believers were here during this prophecy, and I don't personally believe that we will be, but even if we were, the prophecy says that this is only going to affect non-believers. So these things are not allowed to hurt followers of God. We don't have to fear these things. It's only those who reject God. So for us as Christians, there's nothing for us to worry about here. These things are the false gods that people have always rejected God for. And, people are in this prophecy, people are getting exactly what they wanted. They're getting exactly the false gods that they keep worshiping. Yep. They're getting to communicate with their false gods, and that is their punishment, because these false gods are evil and they only want to destroy humanity. So if you belong to Jesus, this punishment is not for you. Even more, you'll get to communicate, you'll get to commune with your God as well, the real God. But instead of it being a horrific, abusive experience, it'll be a wonderful, beautiful experience, and it's exactly what you were created for. So, if you don't know Jesus today, you really should get to know him right now. Start a relationship with him. To get eternal life, all you got to do is trust in him. Just trust that he is the only way to heaven. And his death, burial, and resurrection is his blood can cleanse your sins. But all you got to do is trust in him. Change your mind about him. If you've been rejecting him or if you've been ignoring him, change your mind about that. Believe in him, pray, ask to take part in his promised salvation after this life passes.
Oh, no, Diane, you don't want to go near ABC. They're very left. They're even probably more left than CNN. You don't want to go near ABC.
It's not by any works that you do that gets you to heaven. It's by what Jesus has already done. So Jesus has already paved the way. You just have to trust him for it. It's that easy. So one thing is for sure. You will die someday, and you don't want to run the risk of running into horrible beings like this in the afterlife or in the abyss or in hell. You want to make sure that you're protected and that your entrance into God's eternal kingdom is secure. So today is the day to get that taken care of right now. Call out to Jesus, trust in him, and be spiritually born again in his name. Okay, now we do have a lot more to talk about, but we're going to do that in the members only section. So we're going to talk about the good guys. We're going to talk about the throne guardian cherubim of Ezekiel's vision. We're going to go kind of verse by verse through Ezekiel's vision. We're going to learn how it relates to Revelation. There's so much cool stuff in that. So head on over to dailyrenegade.com and
Canadian Prepper. Where is he? Here we go.
Canadian Prepper here, back on another roasty, toasty day. 100 plus degrees, the only place to find refuge was...
I've got all them items except white vinegar. Diane, I've already got all them items. Oh, no, I haven't got I know what they are at the back. But, yeah, I've got most of them.
On the lake on a boat today, so that's what we did. We're out here foraging wild edibles. We're looking for bug out locations. My friends, the time to prep for the long haul is right now. We got a lot to talk about, everything under the sun, from Iran to Taiwan to North Korea to Ukraine to Russia, United States, yeah. We're going to talk about it all today, so stick with me. But I will say, I want to give you guys a quick pro tip. Go and download the app after this video, of course. It's called Picture This. It's an app that uses artificial intelligence to identify plants. so long as you have a cell phone connection, this is going to be useful as an educational tool. Okay, you're not going to be able to use it off grid, but you can use it as an educational tool to identify medicinal, to identify edible, of course, and just poisonous plants. So go and check it out. Anyway, let's just get right to this. Now, I want to preface this whole quick talk by giving you an interesting factoid that not many people are aware of. Did you know that the term World War I was coined by Time magazine in June 12th of 1939? Not until June 12th of 1939, 2 decades elapsed before they called it World War I. And
I'm pretty sure they called it the Great War up until then. Yeah, the Great War. I bet it was known as that. 39, it was known as World War I. Wow, I never knew that.
Same paragraph, the first speculative use of the term World War II was used to describe the upcoming war. Remember, this is 1939. Why do I say this? Well, right now there's rumblings about, is this World War III, or is it just a limited conventional war? Obviously, once...
Okay, hit my sub too, Diane. Thanks. Australian survivalism. I'll check out his stuff.
We cross the non-conventional line using nuclear weapons, we're going to know it's World War III pretty quickly. But I think when they write the history books, they're going to look back and they're going to say, well, where did it really start, right? What was the true kickoff point? A lot of people think that the true kickoff point is going to be the war in Ukraine, because, of course, after that, as we're going to talk about today, the dominoes start rapidly falling and fighting starts to flare up everywhere else. And when looked at, zoomed out, it all looks like it took place within a very short period of time, aka the year 2022. Now, where to start? Okay, so let's start in the USA. Minuteman missiles are getting an overhaul. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how, when compared to the Russians and the Chinese to a certain extent, whether they're talking about hypersonic weapons, whether we're talking about the ability to carry very large payloads using Sarmat missile systems, ICBMs, incredibly long-range ICBMs that are fast, missile defense technology, submarine technology, all the rest. The Russians have a leg up on the Americans, at least for now. They got mobile platforms to launch. It would be very difficult to fight a nuclear war with the Russians and come out victorious. Now, if you're one of these people who think that a nuclear war can't be won, you need to go and watch our library of videos on the topic, where I think we concisely make our case for why, yes, nuclear war is in fact winnable, and they're preparing to win it. Now, the Minuteman missiles are going to be overhauled. Okay, this is from a legitimate mainstream news source. The U.S. Department of Defense is making plans for a massive years-long project that will bring significant impacts to Montana, upgrading the nuclear missiles scattered across the state. Okay, it includes...
That's going to take a year or two. That's not going to happen quickly.
Renovations of all 450 existing missile launch facilities. The construction of 24 new missile alert facilities and 62 new communication towers within the missile fields overseen by Maelstrom Air Force Base, Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, and Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming. This is very, very important. And it's very important when strategically relocating to know that if a war breaks out, this is what gets targeted first. I'm almost wondering if they're going to scrap this altogether and they're going to move to mobile platforms. That's how you know we're getting serious, because really these strategic warheads that are buried in the ground are sitting ducks. And the Russians, this is why they have all their stuff on mobile platforms, because were they to target these Minuteman missiles and they were to get them before they could get out of the ground, and we tried to strike back, what would we have to target? It would be very difficult to find useful military targets. We'd have to target civilian targets. And they're prepared for that too, with their massive subterranean complexes that can house large amounts of their population. Okay, anyways, in addition, crews can build up to 1,200 miles of utility corridors connecting the various facilities. Now, I don't know if they're talking subterranean here or not, but that's pretty crazy. Okay, And anyways, so I just thought I would let you guys know that that is something that has happened. The U.S. is trying to play catch up in the new nuclear arms race, which is unfolding. And I don't know if they're going to make it in time, to be brutally honest, because the shit's hit the fizzy real quick. Now, Ukraine is getting its butt handed to it all over. It's unfortunate, you know, if you're on that side of the war, and you're a Ukrainian national and you're a proud Ukrainian fighting bravely for your country. Unfortunately, it appears that they're suffering colossal losses, and the Russians are pushing hard on all fronts, which is not to say that the Ukrainians are not giving them a massive run for the money, especially with the use of these HIMAR systems and, of course, the implementation of longer range missiles. Now, where do we go from here? Okay, let's go to North Korea. Okay, there's talk that they are going to be doing a nuclear test soon, and that the U.S. administration is ready to respond to it. And this is the language that they use.
Do you want to learn how to create a feature wall with a real difference?
We'll show you how to do it with some quirky colors and a bold design.
I won't speculate about timing here or what it could look like. He continued, this is John Kirby saying this. He says, Washington administration is obviously going to watch very closely for any possibility of a nuclear test and expects to provide a robust reaction in concert with allies and partners. What does a robust reaction really mean? I don't know. Maybe it just means like, you know, where we reacted. And they're not actually going to do anything in a kinetic sense, or maybe try to impose some more sanctions. But I think they're probably one of the most heavily sanctioned countries on earth at this point. So what more can you really do aside just sit there and watch? But don't sleep on North Korea, because, you know, Joel Skousen, the guy I interviewed before, we don't agree on everything, but he thinks that that's where it could potentially all kick off, because the United States has a very large military presence there. And if North Korea made a move on the south, then of course the United States would be obligated. There would be no way out. You see, they can attack Ukraine all they want, apparently, and we won't really get directly engaged. But when you target an American military base and potentially kill thousands of people there, then of course you're going to get a reaction, right? And then of course that's when the nukes, that's when it gets non-conventional. But North Korea is not going to make a move if China doesn't say so. According to Skousen, he thinks that they're at the behest of Xi Jinping, and that it makes perfect sense that they're basically the watchdog. Okay, they're the first thing that the Americans encounter when they're confronting the Chinese. Anyways, just thought you should know about that. That's going to happen soon. In addition to that, we got Pelosi, who is potentially going to be going there in August. Now, this is very, very important, because if Pelosi goes, China has to now react, because they've talked it up. They said that if they send Pelosi to Taiwan for this meeting, that China will react, and will react, you know, will implement, what will they say? What did they say? We will inflict some sort of forceful measures, I think is the way that they state it. Very aggressive language, anyway. It's the most aggressive that I've ever heard, to be quite honest. If they don't go through with it, then of course China wins, America looks weak, and then that gives China the green light to go in anyways. And of course Taiwan gets very concerned, because Taiwan, if you didn't know, they've been doing all sorts of air raid drills. They are preparing for war on a daily basis. China is continually skirting the fences. I don't know what it looks like, the satellite, if there's military buildups or not, or how they're going to do it. Likely going to be some kind of blockade, attritional thing. I don't think they want to completely level the country. That would make absolutely no sense. They're probably going to try to stage some sort of coup. I'm sure the Communist Party has people within Taiwan that they're going to activate, when it's go time to start to try to foment some sort of revolution on the island. I just don't know. I can't see them going in and completely destroying everything and doing a full-on kinetic war. It's likely going to be some kind of embargo, some sort of blockade, some attritional thing. We'll see. But either way, this is a very pivotal, very pivotal moment, because if the Americans don't send Pelosi now, they look weak. And if the Chinese don't react once they do send Pelosi, the Chinese look weak. They back down and they lose legitimacy in this fight. They have to do something. What will they do? This could be, guys, where it all kicks off. Now, in other news, the Russians have...
I think he's wrong there. We all know Biden and Pelosi are in China's pocket, so they'd be very happy that Pelosi's going to go and represent America. I think he's wrong there.
Received Iranian drones. Why is this important? Everybody thinks, those Iranian drones, just pieces of junk, right? Wrong. Okay, the Iranians, don't get enough credit for their technological level of a development. And the reason why it's so important is because I think it was back in 2011, they hacked an RQ-170 Sentinel drone. Okay, this is a very serious drone of the U.S. military. They hacked it, they reverse engineered it, and apparently they've upgraded it from what it was. So it's even better than the things that they acquired in that hack. Now they are now going to offload some of those drones, or have offloaded many of those drones, to Russia. And I've seen video of these drones, guys. They're no joke. Many of them are kamikaze drones. They have some surveillance drones and attack drones. But the kamikaze drones are nothing to be scoffed at. Okay, these are highly accurate. I think they have a range of up to 1,900 kilometers. So very far, they can be launched from wherever you want. And this is also to show this unity between Russia and Iran. At the same time, as you know, Russia is on the cusp of expelling this agency called the Jewish Agency, I believe it's called, or the Israeli Agency, one of those things. So there's a lot of tension right now between Russia and Israel. This is an agency which seeks to reconnect the Jewish diaspora with the promised land, Israel, whatever you want to call it. And they're getting the boot from the Russians for some reason. I don't know all the details of it, but it's not good. And this, of course, comes at the same time where now the Israel Defense Minister, Benny Gantz, has suggested that his country could launch a strike against Iran's nuclear program, calling it a global problem. Okay, now we've known about it. We've been talking about this before it was cool for a long, long time. And he believes that we are able to seriously harm and delay the nuclear program. However, many other people, including people within his own government, beg to differ. Now, like we've said before, if they do that, if U.S. gives them the green light to go and try to do that, not only is this going to, and some of the counter arguments from within their own government are that this may actually compel the Iranians to want to make a bomb faster, because there's no way you're going to get deep down into those deep underground military bases that they have unless they have spies, agents, and ways to, get into an air gap system by hackers, whatever the case might be. They just don't have the capability to do that. Apparently, the Iranians just broke up a big ring of Mossad spies. So, even if they were to do some kind of attack, it's likely only going to make the situation worse. So here we are at a point where Israel is getting ready to pull the trigger on Iran, where Iran has, committed its drone technology to the Russians. And this not only demonstrates that Iran is supporting the Russians, but it also demonstrates that they have drones to spare. Now, it could just be that they're willing to self-sacrifice because they believe that the Russians will come to their aid and provide them a bit of hospice under the nuclear umbrella. This could very well be what's happening here because they see the writing on the wall with a multipolar world in the future that's unfolding. It may well be that they're just, taking a hit from their own stockpiles, even though they can't spare them, and saying, look, we're going to give this to the Russians with the hopes that maybe this will deter Israel from attacking us so we can develop our peaceful nuclear program and then potentially develop a nuclear weapon. Anyways, this situation, all of these situations are evolving at once. The North Korea one, the Iranian front, and of course the Ukraine front and the Chinese Taiwan front. Okay, not looking good. Meanwhile, EU gas prices have surged to their record levels today as energy concerns have grown over this pipeline shutdown. Now, we talked, at length about Nord Stream 1 being shut down and disabled due to turbine issues. But what I was trying to emphasize in the video yesterday was that now they're actually going to be doing even more repairs on it, cutting back gas to 20% of capacity. Now, I had one commenter reach out to me and indicate that while this is the case, that the actual reserves of natural gas that are stored across Europe are still similar to that in 2021, not nearly as high as 2020 and 2019, but that they were, that we were at these same levels last year. Now, I haven't went and actually done the research to see if that's true or not. If that's true, even if that is true, the problem is that they're not going to be able to fill up those reservoirs. And if you don't have a constant supply, this is the problem, is that they need their reserves to be full. And in normal times, they're using those reserves, plus they're using gas that is still flowing from Nord Stream 1 all winter long. If we're in a situation where Nord Stream is cut back to even 50%, okay, of what it's supposed to be, that means that those reserves are going to dwindle much, much faster. This is why they're wanting to ration supplies. Okay, so that's why it's a problem. That's why it doesn't really matter where the levels of reserve capacity are at right now, because natural gas primarily used to heat homes. Yes, it's used for industrial purposes. It's used for air conditioning. It's used for power in some places, but its primary utility is to keep people from freezing to death. And when they need to turn those heaters on in wintertime and those levels start dropping rapidly and cannot be replenished and supplemented with stuff coming in real time, then that's when you have big, big problems, right? What else do we got going on? I was doing a little bit of research about the Canadian fertilizer situation, in which they want to limit farmers' use of fertilizer to 70% of what it is. It's not an outright ban. Some people think it's a step towards that. I honestly don't know if this is going to pass, if it's going to stick. Is there going to be too much pushback? Because like I say, we're living in a multipolar world right now, so no nation is going to self-sacrifice for the greater good. It's just not going to happen anymore unless we truly are living in a globalist racket economy. But I'm not entirely convinced about that yet. But what I have found is that nitrous oxide, there are drawbacks to using these kind of fertilizers. I'm not saying I agree with it at all, because I don't know enough about it. But apparently nitrous oxide, 100 times the greenhouse gas effect in terms of, like methane and things like that nature. It's on that level of, greenhouse gas effect. And there's also the pollutant factor, right? This stuff goes into the waterways, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not good, but I understand why we need it in order to feed the planet. Now,
okay, guys, I'm out. See you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. I'll do something on aliens tomorrow, Scott. I'm just kidding. Not sure what I'm going to do tomorrow.